She goes through the budget.
I just got an email today.
Okay, I think we're back and we're live.
He just has to
Open it up.
reconvene the public hearing.
I'll reconvene the public hearing for the 2023-2024 budget committee, budget meeting. It says to go through attachment B and read that again from last night. Do I need to do that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
The parliamentarian's back there, and I'm taking that piece tonight.
Oh, there she is. Okay. All right. Yes. Okay. So I call to order the Wilsonville Budget Committee public hearing on the City of Wilsonville's fiscal year 2023-2024 proposed budget. Ladies and gentlemen, the Budget Committee will be taking public testimony tonight at the public hearing. The hearing will be conducted in the following manner. 1, as a courtesy, members of the public have the option to provide public testimony on the proposed budget before the staff presentations begin. In order to accommodate those citizens that do not want to wait until the presentations have been made to speak, community members may elect to wait to testify until after the staff presentations have been completed. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes. A time buzzer will go off when the 3 minutes are up. Testimony will be provided as follows: by proponents, opponents, and those neither in favor nor against the proposed fiscal year budget. 2, staff will present their reports. 3, additional public testimony will be allowed in the same order: proponents, opponents, and those neither in favor nor against the proposed fiscal year budget. After all, 4, after all community members who wish to speak have testified, staff will have the time to provide any additional comments to the committee. Information regarding how the public could attend this meeting and give testimony is posted at City Hall and is also timely published in the Wilsonville Spokesman and is also posted on the city's website shown on the screen. Notice was given that testimony could be submitted for the record in advance in writing by email or mailing it to the city recorder. If you are listening to this meeting remotely, when the time for the public testimony is called, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom or press *9 on your telephone if you would like to testify. If you prefer and have not already done so, you may also submit written testimony by email at any time before the public hearing is closed. By emailing the city recorder at the email address now being shown on the screen. Any testimony sent by email will be read into the record. Please include your name and mailing address with your email testimony. If you are having difficulties with these instructions, you may call the number shown on the screen and enter the webinar ID number shown on the screen when prompted. When called to testify, state your full name and address for the record. I request from those providing testimony not to repeat that which has already been given to the City Council, simply indicating that you agree with the prime testimony given by a speaker you identify as sufficient. At this time, is there anyone wishing to testify? No one? Hearing no further requests, the city manager will kick off the budget presentation with a budget message, followed by staff presentations.
Take it right over to Mr. Catherine.
Okay, and I think Catherine will pick it up from where we left off last night.
Good evening, Catherine Smith, Assistant Finance Director. Welcome to night 2 of the city's Budget Committee meeting. This evening we'll proceed to cover the rest of the city's funds, including policy and administration, community development, parks and recreation, library, and public safety. First up tonight is policy and administration. This includes administration, finance, information technology, legal, and human resources. Each year we like to showcase one of these departments. As such, we'll have a special presentation this year from our human resources manager, Andrea Vilgrena. Andrea?
Good evening. My name is Andrea Villagrana. I'm the HR manager for the city of Wilsonville. Thank you for letting me join you tonight. I provided a presentation to our management group in March, and the city manager and some of the managers at that group thought that it might be beneficial for others within the community and also the budget committee and council to learn a little bit about our recruiting environment right now. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard of the Great Resignation or the Great Reshuffle, and all of us are experiencing it. And one of the reasons why I provided the presentation for our management group was to give them an idea of what we're experiencing, not only from the trenches as far as when they're recruiting, but then also their peers, right? So everybody who is trying to recruit in the public sector or any local government type positions, and the struggles that we're facing in those recruitment endeavors. Next slide, thank you. So a lot of the information that I will provide to you today is part of a report that came from NeoGov. NeoGov is an agency that provides applicant tracking system for the city of Wilsonville, but then also provides an applicant tracking system for over 13,000 agencies within the United States, sorry. And so they have a lot of information that they can pull from for these reports. And this report in particular surveyed 725, I think it was 725 HR professionals to ask them, what are you facing right now? What jobs are hard to fill? How long is it taking you to fill jobs? And then also, are you getting enough applications? Are you actually filling those positions? So one of the items that this NeoGov report looked at was, what is the population looking like right now? So who is in the workforce population? And that is actually super tiny when I look at it up at the screen. But if you on your screen, if you can see that the Generation Z is that furthest to the right, and then the millennial group is the largest group that's in that population chart. So of that millennial group, which is about 72 million people, they estimate right now that 56 million of those are actually looking for new positions right now. They want to shift to a new position, or they've actually even changed jobs within the last 12 months. So if you think about that means that's just the graph there just shows you what the population is. It's not necessarily who's looking for jobs right now. So each of those bars would be a little bit smaller if we're thinking who's out there looking for a job right now. So all boomers will be 65 or older by the year 2030. And if we're looking at those bars on that graph, the incoming population into the workforce is decreasing. So we're experiencing the shrinking of a pool that we can recruit from for all of our positions. Next slide, please. In this report, NeoGov looked at the applications received in 2022, and they looked at 67,000 applications on governmentjobs.com. That's the platform we use for all of our positions that we post. And as they looked at the number of applications they received, they not only saw that there was a decrease in the number of applications per job, they noticed that since even in just from 2021 to 2022, there was a decrease in applications of 56% in overall. And when we're looking at that as far as how many positions we're trying to fill, they noticed that there's an increase in jobs posted of 45%. So we're looking at more positions being posted, more recruitments that we're running, and less applications coming in. Next slide, please. We've experienced that here in Wilsonville. So I ran some numbers to give an idea to our managers and then also to you of what we're facing as far as applications that we receive per job, and then also looking at it from a different lens of qualified applications per job. So on the left, you'll see a very colorful chart of applications we receive per job that's posted. In 2022, we received on average, 12 applications. Of those 12 applications, 8 were actually qualified for the job. So if you think of that over the many different positions that we recruit for in the city, we're looking at not only a smaller pool to review, to measure, to determine whether or not they can do the job. When I finally look at how many people I should actually refer over to supervisors to maybe interview, they're looking at a much smaller percentage of those applications. And that has, it has changed a little bit over the years. So if you see like 2019, we received approximately 31 applications per job, and we would send over half. I'm sending over more applications to those supervisors to review to see if maybe there's something different in their resume, maybe there's a lived experience that they have that they can apply here at the job that they are, hoping to gain in this city. So we are looking at not only the apples to apples experiences that candidates are providing in their application process, but we're also looking at experience that maybe is a little bit different, but still applicable. Go ahead. Next slide. So of those 725 people who NeoGov spoke to, almost 80% of those agencies polled said they couldn't find qualified candidates for their open positions. And while I feel like we are doing a great job in filling a lot of our positions, we have several that are very difficult to fill. I was just very excited to speak to one of our managers, actually just in the back of the room, that we have a candidate who signed their offer letter and is going through the background check, and that position has been open for a very long time. And we don't actually get too excited until the person shows up for the first day, but it's a celebration point, right? So you get a signed offer letter and they're going through a background check, that's something to celebrate. So we are, as public sector agencies, we're experiencing this issue of not only are we getting very few applications, we're not finding qualified applications for our jobs. Turnover is generally the #1 reason for vacancies, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And the #1 reason for turnover right now is directly related to pay. A lot of the great resignation or great reshuffle, more accurately, is because not just millennials, but the entire workforce is able to apply for other positions that they're qualified for and perhaps receive a 10%, a 15% increase by moving to a new position. So when they're looking at, do I stay in my current organization or do I move to a new position in a different organization, that pay is the #1 reason for turnover. Go ahead. There are also a lot of retirements happening right now. So we were just talking about the boomers being 65 or older by 2030. So people are retiring, and that's a great thing. It does, shrink the workforce, but it's great for them to have the opportunity to retire. They probably have been waiting for a little bit. Some of them were waiting for COVID to be over. Some of them waited back when there was a recession, and they waited for a little bit longer. So there were lots of reasons to wait, and now they're deciding it's time to retire. The third reason would be poor management. Their changing career paths would be next. Limited development opportunities is also a very important reason or driving reason for candidates to change jobs. Lack of work flexibility, agency culture, COVID-related decision, that's not coming into play as much anymore, and inefficient operations is also on there. What candidates right now are caring about the most are competitive salaries, having a work-life balance, having better benefits or great benefits, fulfillment in their work, which is something that we talk about a lot in the public sector, and then also those development opportunities and agency culture. So those are top priorities for candidates overall in the workforce. Next slide. In the public sector, those come into play, but there's also these top 3 items that are very important to people who are going into the public sector, specifically looking for public sector work. They are looking at benefits, salary, and job security. And the one that NeoGov didn't include is the opportunity to do meaningful work. So one of the reasons why, or one of the items that we really talk about in a lot of our ads and a lot of our postings is the reason you come to local government is the ability ability to make a difference and make an impact that you can see in your community. So having that opportunity to do meaningful work is really important and is something that we hear a lot in our interview processes from candidates who go through our process. So I gave you the doom and gloom. This is what we're doing right now, and this is in flux always, which is really important in this environment. We're posting much more engaging ads. I think when I first began in public sector, a job post would literally just be the job description. That would be an ad for a new recruitment. We are certainly trying to ensure that we are attracting the top quality candidates that we want to work here, and part of that is selling this place, selling the city of Wilsonville. We're also changing the interview process, and some of that involves that we've tried a lot of different things. So we have a few positions that we have open until filled. And what we'll do with those applications is as they come in, we'll have an interview that week. The minute that application's coming in, we're doing an interview. If it goes well, we're doing the second really quickly after that within the next week, and hopefully we have an offer within a couple of weeks. So we're trying to make a speedy decision for those interview processes so that we can really shorten the application to hire process. We're also looking at, as I said, the lived experiences versus the exact experience. So we have a lot of technical positions that, yes, we need that exact technical experience. But there are other items that are more, say, customer service related. You don't have to have a position specifically working in local government in customer service to qualify for a customer service job here at the city of Wilsonville. You need customer service experience, but that could be in the private sector, that could be part of your volunteer work, that could be there. You could have gained that experience through many different ways. And then we are building on the experience that that candidate brings to the table to shape them into our new team member, right? So they're joining the team. We know that there's going to be some mentorship involved, some coaching. Our managers are prepared for that, and they welcome that. Next slide. What are other things that we can do? Maintaining and marketing our brand is incredibly important. I have started using, and I don't know if it's going to catch on or not, but I like to use hashtag Wilsonville Way on all of our, well, not all, but most of our job recruitments now, and I'm trying to utilize that a little bit more. And part of what we talk about in our interview process is what is so special about this organization. And candidates ask us that. We understand that as part of the interview process, we're asking them questions, and we want to know about their experiences and why they want to work here, but they also want to know from us, why should I come here? Why do you like it here? Am I going to receive the support I need if I'm coming in without the experience that is specific on the job description? Will I receive support from you to train me to gain that experience? To ensure that we're attracting younger generations, we want to also embrace and champion technology. And we do that, I think, very well in a lot of ways. We have our new, 2 years new, Keith, Munis? Yeah. How long have we been implementing Munis? It has been a lovely process. And what we have noticed is that with championing technology, you're able to attract younger generations because they don't want to stick to paper, right? So the more paper processes we use, the less they're interested. And it makes sense in a lot of ways. I would love to get rid of a lot of the paper processes that I use just for myself personally. So having that technology, using those changing technologies is really important in recruiting our next generations. Instilling purpose, as I said, having a position in local government really means that you can create or see the impact of your work almost immediately, I think, in a lot of ways. So instilling that purpose in candidates when they are, not only when they're interviewing, but as they're going through that first 30, 60, 90 days, and having them really understand how their position fits into the entire puzzle of how this city, how this organization works. Setting clear growth paths when possible, and not only clear growth paths, but telling employees how they get there, right? So, for example, if we have job descriptions that are a range of, so a career ladder. A career ladder, in essence, is having a job description that, say, is an administrative assistant 1, administrative assistant 2, administrative assistant 3, and understanding in each of those job descriptions, what does it mean to move between those job descriptions? Setting those clear paths for employees so they know that there's a place for them to grow within the organization is really important. A lot of people will be happy to stay in an organization for a long time if they understand that they can still grow. And recruiting Gen Z now. So recruiting Gen Z now really involves, we have so many internships this year, quite honestly, it's so surprising to me, and I'm very excited that our managers are looking to hire, at least for those learning opportunities, hire in those new to the workforce generation. Because really it starts out getting them interested when they're first starting in the workforce. Next slide. Other items that we're considering too, or that we should consider, is I've started talking to managers about reaching out to your professional networks. So yes, I can call people and ask them, hey, come work for Wilsonville. We're great. It'll be fun. They don't want to hear from me. They don't want to hear from the HR manager. They want to hear from the finance director that they know because they saw them at a conference, 5 months ago or something of that sort. They want to hear directly from those managers. So reaching out to those professional networks. Looking at whether or not we can be more flexible in our hours. Sometimes that doesn't work. If you're a transit driver, you might not have the same flexibility as if you are a planner, perhaps. Can we offer more remote work? Can we work from home more often? And that's something that we did a lot, or we experienced a lot in the COVID years. I don't know if we still call these the COVID years. I hope not. So we are ready for that if employees, if that's something that they're looking for, if a candidate is looking to work from home. Of course, there are a lot of items to consider, but it's all part of the package when you're looking at, okay, what can we offer an employee or a candidate that will entice them to switch jobs and switch jobs to work here? And are we fostering what I like to call the work-life integration culture? So when we talk about work-life, a lot of organizations talk about work-life balance, and the balance isn't actually, there is really no such thing as a work-life balance, quite honestly. When you're looking at work-life integration, you're never going to have a moment where your work and your life will be equal. You're always going to be pulling from one side more than the other. And so are we helping our employees through that? Are we supporting them through when they have an incredible workload and they need help with their workload? Or if they have something personal going on that's taking them away from work, are we helping them with that as well? And then also, are we building upon and welcoming employees into the Wilsonville way? And that really is about the first 30, 60, 90 days when they're here, bringing them into the culture and ensuring that they understand that we are excited to keep building this culture and to see what they bring to it as well. Next slide. And that's it. Do you have any questions? That was really just an informational presentation, and I really appreciate your time.
That was an excellent presentation.
Oh, thank you.
Really enjoyed it. A couple questions. You mentioned that, at least I interpreted the slide, that when someone wants to be a public employee, it seems like the benefits and the salary are more a priority. What's the percentage, though, of work-life balance?
They did not, so in this report for NeoGov, they did not include work-life balance specific to public sector employees. But if I had to put a number to it, I don't know that I could put a number to it, but I could say that I hear this at every interview process. What is your work-life balance here at work? And it's something that we really focus on because we're all human. We all have things going on outside of work. We all have families or just a personal life. So we spend most of our time here during the day, or most of our time working, and understanding that sometimes you're going to need to be a little bit flexible one way or the other from both sides, both parties, is really important.
And my last question is, because we're in this window of having less qualified applications, it must be, do you still go through, I know you do the criminal background check, but do you have enough time? Because I see you're trying to, have these meetings and then get an offer letter out. Do you have an opportunity to talk with prior employers, to at least get a sense of, how they are in the workforce? Because there could be some bad apples out there, and
That's a fantastic question, yes. So we still go through the entire recruitment process. So we do a background check and do reference checks. And as part of those reference checks, I ask the manager, the hiring manager, what are things you want to focus on in this reference check versus me asking just the general things, right? So did the person show up on time to work? Those kinds of questions are fairly simple for a reference check to answer, but is that really beneficial? Do you want to know more? So that's what I ask the hiring manager is, what do you want me to drill into or narrow down as far as information that we're receiving from a reference check? It is still time consuming, but we try and move those processes along as quickly as possible. Some take longer than others, and when we shorten the process, it's a win, and if we can't, then sometimes it's because we're still going through a process. Sometimes it's because a candidate would like more time before they transition to work here.
Thank you.
Of course.
I have a question.
Question?
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation. That was great to have that background. I would assume that you're keeping data about numbers of people that we either offer a position to and they don't accept it, or they're our top candidate and they've already said no.
Gone somewhere else.
Yeah. And I guess it comes down to the question, and maybe you don't have it off the top of your head, but by speeding up the process, I think that's helpful, because if they're looking enough, they may have gone somewhere else. What is the most common reason that you hear when we offer a position to a candidate that we think is going to be great? Is it money, or is it that they found someplace else? What do you hear most? And then I have one more just to follow up to that.
So the most common no thank you I've received over the last year is my current employer has offered me more money.
Okay. All right.
That's the most common. There has also been my dream job came up. There are a lot of others, but the most common is I have received an offer from my current employer to stay.
And that brings me, and I assumed that was going to be part of the question, the answer. So in our positions, I'm assuming that we are competitive with our like group of employers. Are we keeping up? Is the city keeping up to the point where we can maybe make some headway in this market?
We do our best, and so part of that includes market studies that I do on a regular basis. Recently, I didn't do a full market study position by position, but I did a market study regarding cost of living increases of our comparable cities that we use, and then some other cities in the area as well. And so having that information, we're able to look at whether or not we need to adjust salaries, but also we're confined in certain sense by the budget. So we need to look at, is there budget to actually make that adjustment or not? And so typically when I make those or make a recommendation or research that information is before before we are creating the budget book, before we are putting together numbers for this committee. And then we'd include either a COLA in the salary tables, or we might also potentially budget the ability to shift if we need to.
I have a question. Because the number of candidates is going down, are you expanding the geographical area that you're doing job search or candidate search, and how wide is that?
It's everywhere.
Is it national for all positions?
Not all positions, but for those that are hard to reach, we are recruiting everywhere nationally. So, for example, currently we have an outreach position in the library that is open, and I've received only out-of-state candidates for that position. So I haven't received any Oregon candidates for that position just yet. So we're trying to ensure that we're blanketing the nation, in essence, with our recruitment ads. Again, it kind of, sometimes a candidate might find it just by being on governmentjobs.com, even though we didn't send it to like the national professional organization that would be appropriate. For example, APWA, the American Public Works Association, also has an Oregon chapter. We'll often post on the national site, but then also post in the Oregon chapter as well.
I have a question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. It's okay. Okay. You mentioned that sometimes candidates will decline a job because their current employer has offered them more money. Is that something that we use as a strategy to retain employees?
So we have not at this point. So generally what I've seen, because I do track what type of positions employees, if they let us know, what type of positions they're leaving us for, right? So what I have seen is they're leaving for that promotion in another organization, right? If they're leaving for a larger, or a position with more responsibility, or potentially in a larger organization, which is a little bit different than, can we just give you, can we give you a bump in salary? But there are also things that we have to take into consideration when we look at salaries, of whether or not we would even be able to provide a bump in salary based on internal equity and pay equity laws, a lot of different items that we'd have to think about.
Thanks. Go ahead. I'll go next. Well, 2 questions if I can. Can I? I'll go quick. Okay. So kind of backing on Member Barry's question about the sources and advertising and reach and things like that. What sources have been most fruitful for us, or does it really depend kind of position or role to role? What is most fruitful?
Depends on the position, I think,
Okay.
Definitely. But what I have found is a word of mouth is, or knowing people in the profession is helpful. And then also we receive a lot of traffic from the governmentjobs.com website. And I think it's because there are so many agencies that use that website for their postings that a lot of different people all over the country are looking for jobs in that tracking system.
Okay. I was kind of, part of the reason for asking that was I was kind of thinking about, some of your earlier comments about some movement between maybe private to public sector, and maybe there's a little bit of mixing like that happening in some of the roles. So I wondered if we're starting to see an uptick on some of the sites that may not be, somebody's looking through and, oh, that could be interesting, instead of directly seeking out, I want to work for a local government, and they read the job. I don't know. I was curious about that. My other question is, I know yesterday we heard the comment that the professional development budget is back to pre-COVID levels. I'm curious, because so many of your bullets in the presentation can underscore that importance of the ability for growth within a person's role is a reason to stay in that retention piece. Do we know how our professional development budget compares to other cities? Because we're comparing our salaries, but I'm wondering if that is an important piece for retention. I'd be curious how that relates to other cities too.
I do not know.
That ties actually to what I
Cue
was
it up for there.
just going to ask
Yeah, there you
you.
go.
So you didn't mention your attrition rate.
So currently, we are on track for 20% this year of turnover is what we're looking at, 20%, which
Is that typical?
it is fairly typical. We were a little bit high in 2021, 2022. We were at 28%. And before that, we would range anywhere between 15 and 20. Just
Is that
depending on
weighted
the
more
year.
towards skilled or unskilled labor?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Is that weighted more towards skilled or unskilled labor?
It is a mix. So the hardest positions to recruit for and where we've seen some turnover is in, say, trades, so public works positions, parks positions that are in the fields, or then also we've seen a lot in, or not a lot, but it's difficult to recruit in once we have a vacancy in engineering and then also in information technology.
So that goes right into Member Ackervall's question about retention. Do you have well-developed retention strategies, or do you pretty much do it on a case-by-case and department-by-department level?
It's more of a department-by-department level, but we do have conversations of, what are we doing to retain our employees on a managerial level as well in our management groups. That's one of the reasons why we had this presentation, but it is very department-specific.
Mr. Chair, can I ask one more question?
So I'm kind of curious, is there one department or maybe several departments that have the higher attrition rates than other departments? I mean, I guess you just said the trades, so the people that are out in the field or doing mechanics or special skills.
We've seen more turnover in that area, yes, and also in our transit department. Some of that is natural attrition. I will say that a lot of our turnover has to, I think the last number I looked at, it was around 20% is due to retirements. So I consider that some natural attrition. But yes, we do have some higher turnover in those groups.
As a follow-up, it seems like traditionally the managers have stayed for a really long time here at City of Wilsonville.
I think there's a good mix, yeah, a good mix of long tenured and newer managers.
You mentioned about 20% turnover. Have you had an opportunity to compare with your sister cities to see how they're doing in relationship to us?
I have not looked at their turnover rates, no.
I'd be interested to understand that, because maybe they're in the worst boat than we are, or doing better.
We don't really like to talk about our turnover rates. It's like a bad word in HR land, so.
One quick follow-up. Cost of living in Wilsonville, does that have any impact to recruitment? I'm just curious.
We recruit, the employees don't have to live in Wilsonville. They don't have to reside here. So it can become an item that is difficult for people moving into the state because they're not entirely sure where should I live. We provide them with a packet that it's a relocation packet. Actually, our communications and marketing manager gave it to me a couple years ago, or turned me onto it a couple years ago, where it's put out every year. It's a packet or an online magazine that goes through every suburb in the Portland area and tells you about the schools, tells you what the good neighborhoods are as far as, parks and things like that. So each applicant or each, family unit that's moving into the area would have to decide whether or not Wilsonville is the place to live for them. But we have employees from all over the metro area, so.
Other questions? Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for your time.
Next Next, we're going to walk through the policy and administration's slides here. Starting us off is administration. So similar to last night, we're going to just be walking through how we get from the fiscal year 22-23 budget to the fiscal year 23-24 proposed budget. For administration, we have just 2 ad packages for a communication coordinator and a high school summer intern. Additionally, as we mentioned before, just a small increase in employee development and increase in advertising as well. In total, bringing them from a fiscal year 22-23 amended budget of $1.9 million and an FTE of 5.5 to a fiscal year 23-24 proposed budget of $2.2 million and FTE of 6.58. And just a moment here while I try to adjust my screen. I can't see my whole screen. Okay. Thank you. Okay, next is finance. No large changes here. Materials and services includes an increase in contracted services and employee development. For fiscal year 23-24, this includes also an ad package to increase the hours for the accounting specialists, bringing them from a fiscal year 22-23 amended budget of $1.8 million and an FTE of 10.5 to a fiscal year 23-24 proposed budget of $2 million and FTE of 10.7. For information technology, this includes several ad packages, most notably for licensing, software, and technology upgrades. In total, bringing them from a fiscal year 22-23 amended budget of $1.5 million to a fiscal year 23-24 proposed budget of $1.7 million. No change in FTE. Next up, legal. No large changes here. Overall, only a 2% increase from the prior year. In total, bringing them from a fiscal year 22-23 amended budget of $764,000 and an FTE of 3.7 to a fiscal year 23-24 proposed budget of $782,000 and an FTE of 3.8. Next, human resources. This includes no change in FTE and a net 5% increase in requirements for fiscal year 23-24. This is comprised mainly of additional costs surrounding labor negotiations and general insurance increases. In total, bringing them from a fiscal year 22-23 amended budget of $1.12 million to a fiscal year 23-24 proposed budget of $1.18 million. And that concludes the policy and administration portion of this presentation. Before I turn it over to Keith, do we have any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
On employee benefits, you're saying the 11% change, but there's no difference in headcount for FTEs. What was that attributed to?
For
Health insurance increase?
Was it a health insurance increase for
which department? I'm sorry.
HR?
Human Resources. You're talking about the decrease here? I'm sorry.
I'm saying employee benefits, salary and wages had a 3% increase, but employee benefits had 11% decrease.
Budget on the slide.
No, you know, a lot of that, the benefits, it will really depend on the configuration of the employees in that department.
Yes,
And their selections of any given year, and if...
We had an employee that waived insurance this year, yeah.
Yeah, and so
Okay.
those small departments, that the variance could, if one person leaves...
That can be significant.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sometimes the percentage changes are a little, the dollar value is not great, but the percentages...
It's little, but I was hoping it would say, well, you're seeing a decrease in insurance.
For health insurance, we do budget about a 10% increase every year. Sometimes it comes in 8%, sometimes 11%. But health insurance is definitely a driving cost of the city. Okay, so yeah, that wraps up policy and admin, which is housed in the general fund. And next we'll bring up our community development director, Chris Namsu. He'll talk about community development in the city and kind of give us his budget overview of what's happening in the development and planning of the city.
Good evening, Chair Skull, members of the Budget Committee. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. My name is Chris Namsu, and I'm the city's Community Development Department. I'm pleased to be here this evening to present to you the 2023-2024 Community Development Department budget. By way of background, I'll just stay on that other slide for a moment, please, Mr. Katko. I'll prompt you when I want my slides changed. Thank you.
Very well, then.
Thank you, sir. Just kidding. We have two funds in community development. Just wanted to provide a short reminder. Community development is made up of 4 different divisions. We have the CD Administration Division, which includes economic development. We have the Engineering Division, which is capital and development related engineering services. That includes natural resources and stormwater management. We also have the Planning Division, which is made up of long range and current planning. And then the Building Fund is a separate accounting fund within the Community Development Department. And Dan Carlson is our building official, and he's going to follow me this evening, similar to how he followed me at the mid-year review that we did in January, and he'll show you some of the trends he's observing on his stat tracker. So the building division is responsible for all the plan review, building inspections, and the fire life and safety for all construction in the city of Wilsonville, and together those 4 divisions make up the Community Development Department. Thank you, Mr. Katko. Next slide. So similar format to last year, going over department goals first. We are a customer service related department, and we are driven by providing quality responsive customer service to all of our clients. We work across division lines regularly, and so we try to foster a collaborative and high performing workplace. We have a lot of different projects going at different times, led by many different people, and we are consistently cross-pollinating across those division lines and encouraging, again, a very high functioning and high-performing workplace. We have massive amounts of deadlines. Most of those come through the planning side of our house. Many of those legal deadlines, they're very important to our success. They keep us out of trouble and out of appeals and different things related to our land use processes, and satisfying our legal deadlines are one of our major department goals. We also want to keep all of our projects moving forward. So many people out there who are building things, whether it be a resident who's adding on to their home or a construction company, massive national home builder company who's putting in new houses, they're reliant upon us for quality customer service. We got to keep those projects moving forward. We have to be available and responsible at all times to be able to promptly give them plan reviews, promptly respond to those inspection requests in a day's notice. And so that's a big part of what we do. It's very nimble and fast paced within our department. And we're working hard to try to achieve 100% staffing levels. And that continues to be a challenge for us. Ms. Villagrana obviously did a very nice job of that, and we have a real problem within community development finding qualified civil engineers. It's just a real problem right now. And we've had some interviews lately, and our fingers are crossed for some good things to happen, but we still struggle with those vacancies, and I'll cover a little bit more of that on a subsequent slide. Next slide, please. So the last goal is to enhance the livability of the community and continue to grow the local economy by planning and creating great neighborhoods and employment areas through strategic infrastructure investments. This is really at the essence of what we do. We're focused on home ownership attainability, and the council has been working closely with our team on advancing home ownership attainability through middle housing provisions in Frog Pond East and South, as well as the town center vision that we've established. We're looking for different housing products at different price points to try to broaden the availability of homes for all kinds of different folks. And we are also looking for increased housing diversity. And our Frog Pond East and South plan is based on middle housing, which is going to bring some of that diversity to the marketplace. And we've got a couple of big projects. The TOD project is one that we continue to work on with the City Council, and we've also got those 3 mixed-use buildings in the village center of Villebois that have been submitted to our building division. The conditions conditions, the lending conditions are a little difficult for Capstone at this time. We don't know the exact timing of construction of that project, but they have submitted those 3 mixed-use buildings for plan review so that they are ready to go as soon as those conditions are favorable in the marketplace for them to be able to advance. We are seeing significant and continued growth in the industrial sector. The industrial sector is stronger than it has been in many, many years. I've worked here a long time, and this is very cyclic in nature. This is one of the hottest industrial markets I've seen in many, many years. We recently approved 2 new industrial buildings in Coffee Creek, one for Delta Logistics, which is a large trucking company located on Commerce Circle, and another one for Precision Countertops that we talked about last year. They finally received their approval, and they'll be building their campus over off of Garden Acres Road in Coffee Creek. We have 2 more warehouses that are in the queue ready for Development Review Board review by the end of June. One of those is a building that would be located west of D.W. Fritz called W5. It's about a 100,000 square foot building between Kinsman Road and D.W. Fritz along Beckman there. And the other building is for SKB Properties. It's a new 110,000 square foot building located in the Parkworks Industry Center, also known as the former Xerox campus or Tektronix campus. So that building is actually very far out towards I-5, and that one's scheduled for a DRB review at the end of June. So by this time next year, we may have 4 additional industrial projects, all of a very large scale, all under construction. They're all tracking and want to hit the ground here this summer. So that's very, very good news for the department as far as continued development activity. And we continue to make important connections through our capital improvement program on the multimodal transportation system, and we don't want to lose sight about the fact that we continue to try to build the connectivity in the system to serve people of all ages and all mobilities. We're continuing through street maintenance to look at opportunities to restripe and to make our bike lanes safer with the addition of buffered bike lanes. We have several trail projects that we're currently working on, and we've just wrapped up the 5th to Kinsman Road project, which is a very large capital project that includes a nice section of the Ice Age Tonkin Trail that will connect from the water treatment plant where it formerly terminated all the way through that vacant land to the east, connecting down a lovely little boardwalk through an oak tree that we preserved as part of the project, connecting to Boone's Ferry Road, and then able to go all the way down to Boone's Ferry Park. So we have literally completed all segments of the Ice Age Tonkin Trail through the entire community. The last segment that's remaining is on Metro property north of Beckman Road that would head out towards Graham's Ferry Road. So major accomplishment to complete the Ice Age Tonkin Trail within the city, and the 5th to Kinsman Road project brings that last critical piece. Now all we need is a bridge over the Willamette River, and we'll be really poised for tremendous tourism, bicycle activity, and a lot of very positive things. Next slide, please. Achievements. I wanted to speak a little bit about the achievements that we had in this last year. We've literally transformed to paperless permitting. This is a massive milestone. Munis is the finance program. We have a program called InterGov. Our team just returned from the InterGov conference. It was held in Texas this year, and we sent several staff to this, so they're immersing themselves in these various programs. They bring back important nuggets of information to share with our teams to help continue to work through some of the problems that we've got with the software. It's transformational in a number of ways. We used to literally exchange giant rolls of plans with engineering companies and architecture firms, and these plan sets would come in and they'd come in rolled carts of paper, and so many trees were lost because of this practice. It's been transformational because there is no paper in our process anymore. Everything is being submitted to the city via an online portal, a digital portal. It comes into the city. The city is performing plan reviews in Bluebeam software, which is a PDF SketchUp tool that we've all had installed on our computers, and we can do studio sessions and work across consultant departments and between city departments and issue permits without exchanging a single piece of paper. We've also greatly enhanced the customer's experience by allowing them to see directly into the portal and see where their permit is in the process, which gives you the ability to know it's made it through through these 3 steps and you have these 2 steps left, whatever the situation may be. It really puts a lot of information in the hands of an applicant that previously they would have had to call and reach out to city staff, for example, to find out the status. Now you can just use the portal to get straight in there and find the information. We've also been participating in a lot of legislative activities in Salem. Last 4 months have been very busy. I want to recognize a couple of folks. Obviously, the city's incredibly talented lobbyist team of Mark Ottenad and Greg Leo. We're an extension of that team in community development. The city's planning director, Miranda Bateshell, has been absolutely instrumental in several very high-profile housing-related bills, particularly Governor Kotek's bills related to housing. She has provided expert testimony. She has been meeting one-on-one with legislators, promoting a local government approach to some of these things. They're on the doorstep of doing some very dangerous things to the Oregon statewide planning program, and we care deeply about that program and believe it's in the best interest of our citizens and our community to continue to follow that, so we try to represent that in Salem. I've been so proud of Mark and Greg and Brian's office, his incredible team, and Miranda in particular for the work that she's been doing literally face to face. I think League of Cities has her on speed dial now, and she's making great connections and really representing the community in a very solid way. So very proud of that action. The council was also able to adopt the Frog Pond East and South Master Plan, which is really going to set the stage for the next 10 years worth of residential development. Once we get there, it's still a couple of years away before East and South are able to open up, and once that does, that should put the city in a good position for continuation of providing housing in the marketplace. And we're wrapping up the 5th to Kinsman Road project, which some of you may remember was referred to as the Old Town Escape. It provides redundancy in the system, which is really important. If you're a West Side resident, you won't have to mess around with the Boones Ferry Road, Wilsonville Road interchange anymore, and this redundant route off Kinsman Road can bring you down into Old Town, give you another way to navigate the landscape in that general area. And that is a big project. We've been working on that one for several years. And as soon as we wrap that one, we're moving on to another one in the Beckman Road Corridor project, which Zach covered last night, which is 5 capital projects all wrapped together under the umbrella of the Beckman Road Corridor project, is advancing. And we're making progress with an alternative contracting approach, which is called progressive design build. And it's the first time that the city has really taken on that particular contracting methodology. So we're learning a tremendous amount as we move through that project. Next slide, please. We also, Matt Lorenzen, Economic Development Manager, was successful in working with the council on getting an urban renewal strategic plan adopted last year, and planning brought forward a town center infrastructure funding plan that's going to be the basis of additional work around urban renewal that we'll be kicking off here with the Urban Renewal Task Force here in the next several months. And personally, for a bullet for myself, after 20 plus years, the last single family homes will be constructed in Villebois, which is crazy because I've worked on that project since the beginning. And we've wrapped up the last 3 regional parks in Villebois. Parks, I'll just call them 5, 6, 7, and 8 because the names sometimes escape me. But really wonderful. And if you haven't been out to see those new parks, we have over a half mile of Ice Age Tonkin Trail adjacent to the Coffee Lake Creek wetlands, and it's a wonderful experience. Nature viewing, cool playgrounds, a nice big lawn area to be able to toss a frisbee, a little bird park that was just installed with a bird nesting platform and some snags for birds. And then if you keep heading up the hill, a brand new dog park has been installed, and a tennis court is up on the top of the hill as well. So some really exciting recreational amenities have been brought to the community through that. And we're continuing implementation of our equitable housing strategic plan. Again, we brought forward Palindrome as our partner to develop that project at the Smart Central site. And we were successful in, again, working with the council to get vertical housing development zones adopted, which is a tax abatement that promotes a certain type of urban form, retail on the ground floor with residential units above. And that program has been applied to Villebois, the village center, where those 3 buildings will be constructed. They've already made application to the city for that tax abatement, and certain areas of town center have also been included in the VHDZ program. Next slide, please. Our budget story is fairly straightforward, and we have a status quo budget with the exception of one ad package that has been put in by the planning department for $100,000, and that's related to state mandated work related to housing. We have applied for a grant for that work, and we've been incredibly successful over the last several years obtaining what I call other people's money to do a lot of our planning work. We continue to expect to be successful in that venue. The ad package has been brought forward and requested in the event that the grant is not awarded. We still have to do that work. So this is a situation where if we get the grant, which we expect to, we do not need to access the ad package. It's a backup plan to the grant that we've written and submitted. And again, our inability to hire civil engineers has been hampering the advancement of our capital improvement program. We have 3 open civil engineering positions right now, and we just can't get the work done. Last night we shared with you that we have 125 capital projects. Our department doesn't manage all of them, but we do manage the majority of them. When your engineering staff is at 50%, you just can't move as many projects. It's impossible. So we've been forced to bring in outside civil engineering support from a consulting firm to literally advance projects such as street maintenance, because we can't miss a year of street maintenance, but we don't have bodies to run that program right now. So we're bringing in consultants to actually manage projects on our behalf. And that can be expensive. So the plan will be to continue to press forward on those openings. They are open until filled, and we will continue to interview and make offers to qualified folks in hopes that we can get to 100% staffing levels consistent with our goal. And then urban renewal is down significantly for our department, and that's due to the closure of the 2 districts. What a wonderful celebration, and we're going to do, we joke about doing an interpretive dance as part of the closure of the, the year 2000 district. That year 2000 district was established in 1991. I just want you to think about 32 years of urban renewal. We've managed the vast majority of the projects. We literally rebuilt all of Wilsonville Road in 5 phases. We built Town Center Park, Marase Plaza. We did interchanges. We've done infrastructure, pipes, so many projects that have literally transformed the face of this community for the better and made it the beautiful place that it is. That district is getting closed down in June. We're closing the year 2000 district, and those contributions just aren't there because there's no projects left. So next year we'll move into the Villebois, the West Side district, and close that district as well. Each district has 1 project remaining, and I mean it's a moment to celebrate and really reflect on the power of this particular tool. And so it's going to be a time of reflection here over the next year as those close down. But we are realizing some new revenue in the form of $70,000 coming into CD administration through the new Wind Zone program, which is we're allowed to collect 10% of that tax abatement. And so we're seeing that revenue this year, next fiscal year, for the first time. And then as I described, the industrial buildings in Coffee Creek urban renewal area are going to really boost that increment. The second industrial building is being finished by the Black Creek Group. Then we have the 2 new buildings that'll start construction this year. So the valuation is going to capture the second building, and then the following year we'll capture those 2 more buildings, which is really going to raise that increment. It's going to provide hopefully a significant boost that may even allow us to move a couple of those infrastructure projects forward in time and allow us to begin to start building more infrastructure in Coffee Creek that opens up additional land and then brings in some additional development. I'd say development looks steady. It's not robust, but it is steady, and it feels with everything happening from the market and all the conditions with the claims of recessions and all the inflation, and we're still seeing a significant amount of investment in the Wilsonville community, which is really tremendous. And so we feel confident that we're going to still see good things happening in the new fiscal year. The activity in the industrial sector is really strong, and that's a saving grace for us as far as the next year goes. And residential is picking up. If you recall, at the mid-year when I came, we had a fairly abysmal 2022 as far as single-family house starts. And the first trimester of 23, we issued as many homes in that first 4 months. I checked the numbers at the end of April. We had issued 46, which was the exact number that we issued all of 2022. So we're off to a really good start of 2023, and we're about to have pre-construction meetings for 3 more subdivisions in Frog Pond West. And those are big projects. So when you think about the development cycle, our department sees revenue at different points in time. Obviously, the planning division is the first one to receive revenue, take an application through a development process, and then there can be vast amounts of time that goes by before we see the next step in a process. So Frog Pond subdivisions, these subdivisions were approved over a year ago. They didn't make construction last summer, and they're hitting the ground this summer. So engineering is now seeing tremendous revenue through the construction of these infrastructure projects in these subdivisions. And these 3 new subdivisions that are all going to be hitting pre-con meetings by the end of June are going to show a significant uptick in revenue for the community development department that is actually pretty good, as Keith mentioned last night, for our year-end closing numbers, which is, again, a very positive thing. And multifamily with those village center projects is going to be picking up, and Dan has some observations on investment in single-family homes. We're seeing a lot of additions and remodels, which we saw a ton of during the COVID pandemic. Everybody was remodeling in one way or another, and those numbers are trending at a similar level to those COVID years, and we're seeing a lot of people investing in their homes, which is a really, really good thing, and the building division sees most of the benefit from the additions and remodels type of revenue. And construction cost escalation, the last thing that I'll mention, it's very problematic. Zach, last night, as we talked about with the street maintenance budget and the need to amend the budget document and add some money into that program, we wanted to know what's going on. So he looked back 2 years. The cost of asphalt has gone up 80% in 2 years. Wow. The cost of rock is up 50%. I mean, it's just crushed rock, right? It's hard to explain why some of this stuff happens the way that it does. But the good news on things like progressive design build and the Beckman Road Corridor project is that is a construction approach that really is dialed into trying to find those cost savings. So the fact that we have one of our hugest projects that's using this alternative construction, this contracting method, where the contractor is at the table with the design team, finding cost savings, and we're working on a multi-year project that allows the contractor to do things like procure pipe a year before we even put it in the ground, because they can buy it now and they can save money and store it in their yard, and then we know we've got it. Those are some of the things that we're able to do in a project of this nature that you just aren't able to do on a typical low bid type of a construction contract. So we continue to struggle with the cost of projects. It doesn't appear to be getting much better. And I don't really have any explanation for what goes up and what goes down. We are seeing some things leveling off, which I guess would be the silver lining to that whole particular story. All right, I think that's it. Thank you, Keith. I'm happy to field any questions that you have, Council. I'm sorry,
So I have a question. There was a lot of talk a couple years ago about the mental hospital. Is that still on?
That went away.
That did go away completely?
Yeah.
They were unable to get their certificate of need from the state of Oregon. So it was a state process that they were unable to obtain that need that allowed them to build it. So the time frame, our approval time frame went by, and that project expired due to a lack of construction activity. Actually, 5 years went by, and that project is now officially a dead project.
I think they still own the property.
Yeah.
A couple of questions. Just super quick. You didn't mention supply chain. Are we past supply chain issues in construction?
Yeah, the supply chain stuff appears to be mostly electrical related. I know fixtures, switches, odd things like that have really hit the school district, and they've had to delay their construction timeline for the Frog Pond Primary School due to the inability to get some very specific electrical switch. It's like a 60-week delay for, and that's the kind of numbers that we're hearing. So supply chain is still out there. I think it's narrowing as far as a lot of that goes, and Zach can definitely add more context to that question.
And then one other question, and that's regarding Villebois. You said the plans have been submitted. So once that happens, is it a 5-year time frame? before they expire, or is it after approval?
So the planning permit is only good for 5 years. You get 2 years off the bat following your approval, and then you're allowed to ask for up to 3 additional one-year extensions for a total of 5 years. So that's the planning approval. So that project, if nothing happens, that project goes away after 5 years. If substantial construction happens, then they can build one of the buildings, and then the other 2 are good forever. But Dan and the building division, they're into that process, so they're going to keep their planning permits alive. They know that they need to deal with that. And then Dan in the building division has a whole different set of approvals for keeping plans alive through this type of plan review, and he can explain a little bit more of that when he comes up.
Thank you. I have a question.
Yes.
Thank you for that great presentation. You mentioned, I think you're referring to the House Bill 3414 and related bills, yes, which are really, our planning director, Miranda, has just been championed all over the state for her expertise, and your whole department is helping with that, I think. But if this House Bill 3414 passes, and maybe you could just describe a little bit about what it means and what it could mean, just describe it for the committee. And my question is about the cost that would bring. Oh, here's Miranda.
Yeah, she knows enough to know I won't be answering this
question. The cost that might bring to our city, and when would it hit us? Were your ears burning?
A little bit. Thank you, Mayor, members of the committee. My name is Miranda Bateshaw. I'm the planning director for the city. So House Bill 3414 has a few components to it. One, it would establish a state housing accountability and production office. That office would live within the Department of Land Conservation and Development. It would bridge or work with both planning, land use planning, as well as building permits. So it would be related to housing in both of those kind of departments within the state and within the city. That office would have a component of, I don't want to use the term enforcement, but technically enforcement. It is there to hold cities accountable if they are not implementing housing consistent with state law. So the primary purpose of it would be to make sure that if somebody were to question a policy at a city level, for the state to be able to review it and see if it's actually consistent with state law. And it's potentially really important given the significant changes in state law around housing that has occurred over the last 4 years and is going to continue to occur, especially with the new House Bill 2001 that passed this year. Which introduces the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis, which will change how cities currently do their housing needs analyses. So that's the purpose of the office. It could potentially bring resources. Part of this is for them to get resources from the state, have allocated budget to help cities get into compliance so that it wouldn't just be, this part of your code doesn't comply, but it would provide technical assistance or financial assistance to help bring that code into compliance. So that has been the purpose of it. There are a lot of challenges around how it's currently drafted as to what that would mean, how accountability would occur in relationship to our existing processes, like with the Land Use Board of Appeals and any other existing appeal processes or enforcement processes. So we're trying to provide direction and help, and to make sure it doesn't really influence our local processes or development decisions that would build housing. The second component is there is this variance component, which essentially states that housing developers would be required to get a variance for the things that they ask for, except for a list of things. And it provides a list of different components like protection of beaches and rivers, different elements of what would be building and safety issues, fire district issues. There's a list of different exclusions that you don't have have to give a variance for. We've been commenting a lot because it could be very cumbersome to implement that. Typically in planning and with the Land Use Board of Appeals process and legal findings, what you typically see is, here is the list of things that are allowed, and it's very clear and objective and specific. And so then the things that aren't on that list are not allowed. And it's very clear. And so we are trying to get this, whatever might get passed, be more clear and objective, be a list of the things that you can get instead, and not have what I call gray language that could result in more appeals. It would also, from a potential budget standpoint, impact the planning department significantly if we are needing to now write substantial findings around these variance requests, which is how the bill is currently written. And so instead of us being able to have clear and objective things that you can get a variance for, if you're, say, producing additional housing or housing of a different price point, we would be able to look at those things and say, yep, they check the box, they get those things, and we don't have to write a lot of findings. The way it's drafted now, we have a lot of concerns about the amount of work it would take for staff to process those applications, and that it would actually slow down our review of housing applications, and that we would actually potentially slow down the production of housing. So that is, in terms of, at this point, what we are thinking the impacts could be to the planning division and what the impacts would be to staff. It's hard to know until we have a final version of the bill to understand what that might mean from a financial perspective, or even how much work it may end up being.
And so could you give a little description of some of the variances, just so we can picture it, like setbacks, sidewalks, access to front and back of the house, and just things that might, we could envision might change about the way neighborhoods look, or we think they're going to look?
So all of those things are currently on the table. The way that the current draft has been the -6, it pretty much allows everything unless you're on that list. And so a lot of the things that are on that list just have to do with health and safety. You can't get a variance for infrastructure that is water, sewer, stormwater, but transportation is not listed. And so from our perspective, that could impact the transportation system and what we could require of a developer to implement, particularly related to multimodal connections and things like Chris was mentioning, our trail system, which is pretty comprehensive. There are things that we are concerned about that aren't on the list, are related to things like trees and tree canopy. Goal 5 is not listed on the list. That would also mean historic resources for other communities that have a lot more historic preservation protections. We are concerned that they haven't specifically called out housing production strategies or climate-friendly and equitable community strategies. And so we're making all of these changes to our code. We just went through all of the changes to adopt middle housing, and now we can't enforce all of those things because essentially the -6, the way it's drafted, is it says it only has the exclusions to the variance, which means everything else is on the table. So there has been a lot of work to try to flip that, as I mentioned, and there is a -5 amendment that does exist, which is specific to, it would be these things. That is much more specific to things you would be typically reviewing in a development application that they might ask for. So there are things like minimum lot size, minimum frontage, setbacks could be reduced, landscaping could be reduced by a certain percentage, so you wouldn't be doing no landscaping, but it's possible that you could maybe reduce that landscaping. Those are the types of things that are on the table right now in the -5. Design standards above the ground floor for mixed-use buildings, so like in Town Center, we would no longer be able to enforce design standards above the ground floor. We're trying to argue to be able to protect the ground floor because it's very important in creating a walkable pedestrian environment with the right design and uses on the ground floor. That is something that is in the -5, but we don't know what will happen. So those are some examples.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was Cherry. Thank you.
I have a couple questions. Miranda, this might have something to do with you, but I don't know whether Dan's. It's mostly Chris's presentation. Are we at that point where we're taking all those questions? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I appreciated that we're trying to go paperless, but I also have sat on the Development Review Board, and I know that that's not paperless. Are we trying to get to that, where we don't have to print everything out again for DRB?
That is correct.
I have a little laptop. Right?
That is correct. I believe at this point, all of our Development Review Board members may be paperless. Okay. We did for a time have, I think, one person who liked to get the paper when they were chairing from home on their computer via Zoom. And so we were providing just that one copy, but yes, we have tried to reduce that as much as possible.
The other, I wonder if we're a little bit lagging behind. I just got done reading this morning that Home Depot's first quarter was quite dismal, and that they're seeing that those home improvement projects are tanking, mostly because of higher interest rates and people taking on smaller projects. So instead of doing a big remodel job, so I'm hopeful that and Dan's anticipation that we're going to continue on that trend, but I don't, sometimes smaller communities lag behind what's happening across the nation and other places. So I don't know that it would make much difference in terms of budgeting, whether those start to level off or decrease. It's really encouraging, because I think the commercial piece of it is going to be helpful, but I hope we don't run into housing starts that are down because of interest rates and those kinds of things. So I just don't know what your crystal ball looks like.
Well, we can roll into Dan's presentation. Let me do the budget numbers for CD admin, and we'll have Dan come up.
Maybe other questions for me, and then Dan will follow me, and we'll do the building division at the very end. And then he's got his stat tracker with those numbers, member Linville, and then he can show you what he's seeing as far as some of that trend. It all kind of rolls together, but we'll just go over the department numbers budgetarily really quick here. The CD admin had a 22-23 budget of $633,000. It rolls up to a proposed $656,000 budget. No changes in FTE. And then we have the engineering department has a $1.3 million budget for fiscal year 22-23. No real changes in FTE. They still have 7.6 budgeted. As Chris mentioned, there's 3 engineers. That's planning, Keith.
Oh, that's planning, sorry. So we have 7.6 FTEs remaining for a proposed budget of $1.4 million. No real significant changes on the planning budget either.
Can I ask a question about that particular one? We're not budgeting for those 3 civil engineer positions, or?
They're in the budget.
They're in the budget.
They're just unfilled.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, here, I skipped it. That's the slide. Okay, this is the engineering department. So they had a fiscal year 22-23 budget of $2.4 million and 13.5 FTEs, and they are fully budgeted. We budget fully anticipating full employment. So we rarely reach we'll never reach full employment, but we have to budget that way. And we budget really the worst case scenario in terms of, financials. So, and they have a proposed budget of $2.4 million. And then briefly wanted to just touch on the Community Development Fund as a whole. In the back of the budget book, we do a 5-year forecast. And as kind of Chris mentioned earlier, the Community Development Fund is perpetually rocky. We have a pretty solid understanding of expenses and generally forecast out full steam with that, full employment. The reality, the expense picture is never as linear as that. They're down 3 engineers, they're down a stormwater coordinator. I would anticipate over the next 5 years, it'll be a rocky road in terms of full employment for that fund, but we budget full employment. So the expenses are budgeted at full on. Revenue projection in the development department is not as clear. There's really an inability to predict revenue, and particularly the timing of that private development revenue for the city. So you'll see that the expenditure line is above the revenue line. It's just because we really budget revenue and anticipate revenue very conservatively. But the reality is this community has, as Chris articulated there, this tremendous growth potential for development. It's just hard to quantify it. We don't know when that timing is coming. So that's why there's an appearance, and it is on the perpetual watch list. We watch this fund every year. They do vital and important work for the community, but we really have to monitor it year after year in terms of when that revenue comes in. And then also, as Chris mentioned, we are anticipating grant revenue, but we don't have the award yet. So we don't put it in as revenue. That'll certainly help this fund out, in the short term and in the long term, year over year. So just wanted to give you a brush of the 5-year forecast. And that whole 5-year forecast for every fund is in the back of the budget book. So now we can roll.
I have a question back on the other chart. Yeah. So on the revenue line, is that a combination of residential, commercial, and is it a cum of all residential, commercial, and industrial?
It includes much more than that.
And more.
The transfer in, it's the managing of the projects, it's the urban renewal projects, it's the capital projects, it's the permit revenue, so it's all of those various revenue streams that make up our line.
Okay.
Much of community development is funded through the engineering department bills their time, tracks their time to specific capital improvement projects, and then those funding sources, be it a water, sewer, or stormwater, or street, even if paid for by STC, can be reimbursed to the CD fund for that time that they have tracked their time.
So is there a limit, a bottom line limit for reserves?
Yeah, there is, and that's that. It's that financial policy minimum, and that's in our city financial policies. It's 15% of materials, their personal service and materials and services budget for that. So that's the bottom line. We can't go over. You see that line, crossing over there, but that's because we just don't have that clear picture yet. Mm-hmm. We anticipate the revenues are going to pick up, but we don't have it in there as a block yet. So the next year they're in budget. Their budget's balanced. We just have to keep monitoring it and keep pushing for the funding sources to come in a timely fashion. So I think.
Could I ask a question regarding the expenses? I heard you emphasizing that we're budgeting the full FTE count consistently, but we're also experiencing consulting expenses related to not being at fully staffed. Do we budget both of those expenses, or do we just budget one and assume we're going to pay one or the other? How does that work?
We don't typically budget both. It'll be in the. It'll be in part of their budget as assuming that it's going to be soon filled by a full-time person or an actual person here. So we don't budget both.
But it would go from personnel services to contracted services.
Right.
So it's both in the budget.
Yeah.
So then you just have to make sure that whatever you're spending for consulting expense doesn't exceed what you've budgeted for personnel.
It's the bottom line budget. As long as they're staying within their, the boundaries of their bottom line budget, we can move money around within line items.
Okay, thanks.
So that kind of rolls into a different fund which tracks the building permit revenue in the city, and that is Dan's area, and he can talk more about really the individual permitting that's going on.
All right, good evening. My name is Dan Carlson. I serve as the city building official. It's good to be here tonight. Just wanted to give you a brief update tonight. You may recall, most of you probably recall, in February 1st, Chris and I tag teamed a very comprehensive sort of an update on the overview of development activity and what we anticipate, what we expect, looking into the crystal ball, as best we can. And and just forecasting what we believe the development activity will be doing. So tonight, what I want to do is sort of scale that way back, just give you an update, really sort of a 4-month update, because now we have actual data from January through April. And so I want to give you kind of a snapshot relative to this graph that you see here, which is what I shared when we met with you in February. So just to kind of give you some perspective for those maybe that weren't here, the blue line, the dashed blue line, is a total number of all of our permits, okay? And you'll see that I liken it to a roller coaster, and it sometimes feels like that. But you see that number 904 permits in 2022. That number, if I take and share with you from January until April, that 4-month period starting 2023, that number is 467 permits. So we're already, just in those 4 months, the first third of the calendar year, we're halfway, at the halfway mark, or a little bit more than that. So that's good news. That's good news overall. I do want to say that it does, when we're looking at putting together revenue forecasts back in January, we a lot of times don't have a very clear picture as to the projects that we're looking at. Just give you an example, we have a project that just it looks like it's really got some legs right now, and that is the redevelopment of the Sherry's site. We're looking at a 5-story multifamily building. We didn't know, we did not know about that project in January when we were budgeting for revenues. So that's why, when we get to today, when I'm presenting this now, the numbers that we present back in the mid-year update to now can vary. And so it's very complex trying to forecast these revenues. Next slide, please. So moving on to, this is a little more of a deeper dive into that previous slide, because, we take the total number of permits off of the graph, and then we get to see a little more macro level of, the first red line is the commercial TIs, remodels, and additions, and that number in 2022, we finished out at 203 permits for that. And I've often said that this trend line here that you see here, in my view, this is a really, really healthy trend line for Wilsonville. This speaks to the health of our business community. They're reinvesting in their businesses. We have a pretty steady stream of remodels, additions, tenant improvements for our business community. And that's great for our fund. That's great for our community. And so that number right now, again, January through April, is at 82. So it's tracking with that. That's almost a third of, it's tracking with that 203 number that we saw last year. So just to kind of give you the playing field there. Now, if I look at the single-family permits for new permits, as Chris mentioned, in 2022, we had a sum total of 46 new home permits that we issued. So far to date, January through April, we are at 48. So that's very positive. That's not something I really anticipated back in February, right? So that's great. Another one that's really surprised me recently is the number of single-family remodels and additions. And I think it was mentioned here just a little bit earlier about, Home Depot. That tends to be where people go when they're remodeling and adding on to their houses and whatnot. But the number of single-family remodels and additions last year was at 46 as well, and right now, January through April, we're at 47. So we're already exceeded where we were last year. People reinvesting in their homes, making their homes, which I think that's very positive. That speaks to the people who want to stay here, live here, and really reinvest in their homes, which is their most significant investment generally. So that's good news. And then the number of brand new, the green line, the number of brand new commercial buildings is at 2. But you'll see that trend line doesn't really rise and fall very much. We do, as Chris mentioned, we have Villebois Village Center with 3 new buildings in the queue. We're likely to see Sherry's. We know that we've got a Frog Pond primary school that's coming at us. So a lot of work in the queue, in the hopper. That's all very positive. I will tell you, though, that we generally will budget our revenues very conservatively. In the off chance that those projects don't come through, there's still, we hear the R word. We don't like to talk about the recession word, but we hear that. We have, I think you mentioned supply chain issues. We do have supply chain issues impacting projects. It's impacted the primary school project pretty significantly. We also hear about labor. Labor is still an issue. It's an issue for us in the building division. It's an issue for contractors in the field. So all of that plays into this, really complex dynamic. And we really try to do our best to provide a conservative revenue estimate and expect that maybe we'll do better, when we likely will. But if we do, then we adjust as the year progresses. So answer any questions that you might have.
A quick question. These are great charts, and I'm really glad to hear that 2023 started off so strong. The value or of a permit, an issued permit for a commercial building, from a cost standpoint or a revenue standpoint, is that significantly greater than a permit that's issued by the city for a single-family home?
Not significantly greater. There are 2 different charts that we use, one for single family, one for commercial. And they are fairly close in terms of the valuation. As the valuation goes up, so the permit fees are established based on that value.
So if you were to reposition this this chart from a value standpoint, as the cost goes up, it would look significantly different, correct?
Yeah, I mean, as we get more value, just for example, so in, I wish I had my valuation chart here handy. We have a valuation chart that shows, like we had, in the last couple years, we had DAS, the state DAS project, a $70 million project. We had the Twist Bioscience project, another $60-70 million project. We had the Performing Arts Center at the high school. That's a $24 million project. So about $150 million of projects just in those 3 projects alone.
Yes, so outside of the budget committee, I would love to be able to see that from a value standpoint, if you have that available.
Sure.
Not right now, but just if you can just shoot that over.
Absolutely. Happy to provide that.
Great, thanks.
Other questions? Okay, thank you.
So we just have one department in the building fund, and that is the building inspection department. They had a $1.3 million budget in fiscal year 22-23 with 7.8, and handful of adjustments to get to a fiscal year 23-24 proposed budget of essentially 1.3 million and the same FTE level. No ad packages. Nope. So if there's any additional questions for Dan?
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We can switch into now, we have three remaining departments. Parks and Recreation.
So next up, Parks and Recreation, for which I'll turn it over to Parks and Recreation Director Chris Ammerman.
Good evening, Chair Skoll and committee members. I get to talk to you about Parks and Rec this evening. We're basically broken up into 2 divisions, General Services and Park Maintenance. Next slide, please. And this is our mission statement for Parks and Recreation, and I won't read the whole thing, but basically I just want to draw your attention to a few of the highlights. So our mission is to basically enrich the quality of life for citizens of Wilsonville. We do that through offering recreational opportunities. We do that by providing safe, clean, and green spaces to recreate, so our parks, our trails, our open spaces. And then we do these things with an eye towards sustainability. So not just, doing those things for today's generation, but looking towards future generations and preserving those special places for those future generations. Next slide, please. So on the general services side, so we offer a variety of services on the general services side. So everything from, so looking at maybe classes, for an example, we have everything from ukulele jam to oil painting to your more traditional fitness classes. When you look at our camps, our summer camps, we have also, we try to provide a variety of things. So we offer chess camps, outdoor adventure camps, and of course your traditional youth sports camps as well. We also have a number of special events throughout the year, so 12 to 15 depending on the year and what our staff capacities are like, but we strive for 12 to 15 a year, and these are your large special events that many of you have probably been to before, your community egg hunt, movies in the park, those types of things. What that picture is of the Harvest Festival last fall, and that's another one of our large events. And again, these are free. They build community, and they're great events. So that's one more thing we do. Facility reservations. We have a number of shelters and parks that are available to reserve for private events. We also have the Tea House down in Boones Ferry Park, and what that picture is of in the backdrop is the Steinbouger Barn, which has become a very popular wedding venue here in Wilsonville. We also have sports fields and, of course, the community garden, which has 144 plots. Next slide, please. Our community center is under the general services umbrella, and again, we offer a lot of services at the community center. I'll just take a few moments to highlight the nutrition program. So that nutrition program offers home delivered meals and in-person meals, and just to give you an idea of the volume of meals, so the home delivered, we're back up to, during the pandemic it was a little bit difficult to offer that, and there was a kind of a reduced schedule, but now we're back up into full capacity, and so the home delivered meals are daily, and then we're back up to 4 times a week with in-person meals. And so in total, just to give you an idea of the volume, like I said, last year alone, the nutrition program put out close to 25,000 meals for the calendar year. So it's just pretty impressive what that program can do, and the lives that it touches. Yes.
I just had a question on those meals. Could you describe, Chris, how people qualify for that? Either, delivery or in person?
The in-person, anybody can come in and have a meal. It's suggested, I think, that it's 60 plus, but no one is turned away, and it's free. There's a suggested donation, but it is free. If someone can't make that donation, they are not turned away, and they can enjoy the meal. The home delivered meals, that's a good question. I might have to get back to you on that one. I think we vet that through our Sadie Wallenberg, our social services provider. So,
yeah, I think
great.
The donation is so passive. It's great. They suggest a donation, but you can walk in there and sit down and eat. No one's going to question you, from what I've seen.
That's correct.
And the stories that are being told about some of the individuals who are being delivered the meal, it's the only contact that they have. some of these homebound individuals with any other person during the day. So we're providing not only healthy food, and we're not tied to Meals on Wheels. We're independent and operate and self-sufficient. And not only is it the single contact they have, but it's also a way to not only provide the nutrition, but also make sure members of our community are safe. Yeah, they're living by themselves. They're barely getting around, and it's so much bigger than a meal. And I think the community service is just spectacular that you're providing through the meal program.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for bringing that up, actually. It does. It serves as somewhat of a safety and wellness check if that is the only contact they're getting. And there have been instances, and I don't know the exact details, but where that has basically saved someone from some sort of medical condition or what have you. So yeah, thank you for highlighting that. I will also say the in-person meal, it was so important for that group to come back together after COVID for the social aspect and not just the meal itself. So, yeah, good. Thank you, Member Dunwell. So, yeah, that covers the meal program. Again, with the classes at the community center, we try to provide a wide variety. There's Tai Chi, there's yoga, there's bar classes, there's your typical fitness classes, and sit and be fit. So there's all kinds of opportunities for folks to partake in those. There's drop-in activities. Bingo is a popular one. And then I mentioned social services, and then we do have a number of health clinics. We have a Life Lecture 101 series, which is a great program, and those fill up. And then fitness studio, multi-purpose room that is also available for reservations from community members, and a computer lab rounds out the highlights for the community center. Next slide, please. In Parks and Recreation, we also have a number of boards and commissions. So, I'm not used to this. In previous lives, it's pretty much been the park board, but here we have the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, and that board offers is a review team for the Community Opportunity Grant. The arts, we also have an Arts and Culture and Heritage Commission, newly formed about a year ago, and that board oversees the Community Cultural Events and Programs Grant, which is newly kind of rebranded from the Tourism Grant. And then we also have the Kitakata Sister City Advisory Board, and that fosters the relationship that we've had for 38 years, I think, between our City of Wilsonville and City of Kitakata, Japan. We also, and these are listed as other because they're not official city boards, but they are staff supported. So, and those are the Korean War Memorial Foundation of Oregon and the Wilsonville Community Seniors Incorporated, which, again, they're not official city boards, but they are staff supported. So that they do take up some staff time for that. Next slide, please. And on the park maintenance side, we have, you guys, everybody in the community sees this, the results of the work that this team does day in and day out. If you've ever gone to a park or walked a trail and enjoyed just a green space in the community, our team of roughly 12 FTEs maintain 19 parks, 268 acres, and roughly 18 miles of trails. Beyond those duties, which they do a great job of, they help support our planning and development of new parks. They oversee projects. Great example of a recent project that was completed and is actually award-winning now is the Nature Play project. So hopefully you've been down to check that out. That's in the bottom portion of Memorial Park. Another big thing that's coming up soon that the team does and is very proud of and the community loves is our water features, the one at Marassi Plaza and the one at Town Center. Those will be opening up June 1st, and we know everybody's super excited, especially with the heat we've had, to get those opened up. So the team is working on getting those ready to go. And then I mentioned special events earlier. With all the different events, it takes it takes a village to put on those, and so our Parks Maintenance staff and team is very supportive of all those events, and we just couldn't do it without many hands making light work for those events. So next slide, please. And this, I think this is one of my last slides, or maybe getting close there, but we are requesting for this coming fiscal year budget, we're requesting an additional FTE. And if you look at this chart, I don't know if you can tell, but we're adding acreage, with the growth that the Community Development Department mentioned. It's community-wide, but at parks as well. And we're taking on, I believe it's 27 acres by the end of 2024. So we're going from 268 acres currently to 295 by the end of 2024. And that additional acres means additional bodies to maintain those to the level of service that our community desires and that we take pride in offering. So that is the result of that is just related to growth. And then next slide, please. I believe that's it. So we try to have fun doing our work because that's
great.
It's fun. So and we have a great team. So happy to field any questions you may have. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for all your great work.
Yeah, thank you.
We think you're fantastic, so thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Next, we just have 2 slides here for Parks and Recreation. First, for general and community services, material and services includes an increase in tourism development. Further, for fiscal year 23-24, we have 2 ad packages, one for arts and culture program supplies and another for the Laser Light Show. In total, bringing them from a fiscal year 22-23 amended budget of $1.8 million to a fiscal year 23-24 proposed budget of $2 million. No change in FTE. Next, for park maintenance. For fiscal year 23-24, cost increases reflect the growth and expansion, as Chris was referring to, of park amenities and the costs associated with maintaining current service levels during and beyond expansion. Ad packages here include the addition of a full-time and part-time parks maintenance worker, totaling 1.38 full-time equivalencies. Additional ad packages include supplies, skate park maintenance, and 2 vehicles. In total, bringing them from a fiscal year 22-23 amended budget of $2.2 million and FTE of 12.25 to a fiscal year 23-24 proposed budget of $2.6 million and FTE of 13.63. And that concludes our presentation on Parks and Recreation. Do we have any questions?
No. Before, I just have one, and I apologize if this was discussed last night, but I'm just wondering where the maintenance costs for the new camping area
They're in
being
facility.
budgeted. They're in
Public Works facility.
Okay.
A lot of it is being spent this year, but we're also adding budget money for next year.
We added $50,000 there. Yes. Before we move on to library, is this a good opportunity to take a break?
Yes.
I think you read the room.
Oh.
Okay. So the chair has to adjourn for...
Yeah, recess.
Are we allowed to?
Recess.
There you
How
go.
long?
See, look at that.
Recess.
10 minutes?
How responsive was
How
that?
much time?
10 minutes. 8:02.
Brian,
Okay.
how much time?
10 minutes, maybe?
Reconvene.
Yeah, she's got the lights. She just told me about that.
She has to smile. Come on.
Maybe gavel us back.
Gavel. Back in session.
And next up, we have library, for which I'll turn it over to Library Director Shasta Sasser.
Good evening. I'm Shasta Sasser, Library Director. I'm here to talk about the library. I remember this time last year I was up here talking about how excited we were to have story time back at the barn under COVID precautions. It's been a year and now we have 80 to 100 people attend each story time in the library. We're doing 40 plus programs and outreach events every month. We've got an average of 550 people coming into the library. It's not uncommon to have over 700 on our long days. And we're circulating about 22,000 physical items every month. A big goal for us this year coming out of the pandemic was to reconnect with our community partnerships, and we've done that. We're back doing Coffee Creek Head Start story times and book clubs. We partner with DHS to sign people up for benefits in the library, and we're back in the schools. So we've reconnected on over 30 partnerships locally. Next slide, please. So in the last year, we've added quite a few services also. If you aren't aware of our cultural passes, with your library card, you can go on our website and get passes to several local attractions, Japanese Garden, Pittock Mansion, Evergreen Aviation Museum. And this year, we've added matinee tickets to the Portland Opera, the Hallie Ford Museum of Art in Salem, and Clackamas County Parks. And our state parks pass is now available to print and download from home. We've added imaginative play toys, which is critical for early literacy. We've also added STEAM toys for our children's room. Just a few weeks ago, we launched our Seed Library. We've partnered with Parks and Rec on that to promote their garden plots. And we're doing programming such as container garden. We've also added a whole slew of children's items to our very popular library of things. So we've got games, toys, and STEAM activities in there. Our foundation has supported us in adding a geochron. If you haven't seen this yet, I encourage you to come down to the library and check it out. It's a giant digital world clock, and it has time zones. It shows you where in the world it's daylight versus nighttime. It also has a direct feed from the International Space Station, so you can see what they're looking at from the space station and where it is in the world at that given time. We've also added several programs. My favorite is the Repair Fair. That was a partnership with Clackamas County Sustainability and Solid Waste. Community members brought in 70 items to be repaired. Of those 70, 52 were repaired that day. Another 7 or 8 were in process of being repaired, and those items are not in the landfill now. They are repurposed and in use again as a second life. We've also added a walking book club, a tiny art show, which was very popular, and last fall we did a murder mystery night. We've also, the one not on the slide that I wanted to mention is we've added back a play group, which is very popular. It just gives parents a chance to connect with each other while their children play with lots of different fun activities. So for our budget story, one of the things that we are doing is trying to reduce barriers to access. So right now our fines are 25 cents per item per day, and we would like to reduce that to 10 cents per item per day. Many libraries in Clackamas County, of which we're part of a consortium, have already lowered their fines to 10 cents per day or are in the process, like us, of lowering them. We also increased our budget for downloadable materials. We use 2 platforms that our patrons can access digital materials. Libby is a state platform. We have a state pool that many libraries contribute funds towards and buy materials that we can access. And then Clackamas County has a separate section of that where we buy materials just for Clackamas County. And then Hoopla, we just added last year. It has over 1.3 million items on there, and you don't have to wait in line for any of them. You can download them right away. There's ebooks, digital audiobooks, graphic novels, TV shows, music, all sorts of stuff. So that's been really popular too. In this budget cycle, we've started implementing a long-term staffing plan with a small FTE increase of 0.9. We stretched that 0.9 quite a bit because we know the value of FTE, so 0.5 of that would go towards a part-time clerk, and that will help us reduce our reliance on all on-call substitutes that are regularly occurring shifts. 0.25 is taking one position, our support services coordinator position, that's a lead, and reclassing it as a library supervisor and making it full-time. The remaining little bit of FTE is to help in youth services with our programming and desk coverage. And then the last thing in our that I want to highlight in our budget is replacing our drive-up book drop. The one we've had has been repaired several times, and the bins need to be replaced, and you can't buy them anymore, which is a bummer because they're perfect size. So we need to replace the whole thing, make sure it's nice and watertight for our materials. I'm happy to answer any library questions.
I'm sorry, I always have questions.
That's fine.
What percentage of your staff are volunteers versus paid employees?
We have 16.76 FTE of regular staff, and we have about 4 FTE of volunteers.
I have a question.
Question?
Oh, you go ahead.
Kind of piggybacks on that, so, okay. For the volunteer staff at the library, I know that COVID kind of threw volunteer positions in many ways, you know, through a change. But what have you seen as far as volunteers returning to positions at a similar level to before COVID, or what does that look like?
It's still climbing a bit. It fell off during COVID. We didn't have volunteers. And then when we brought volunteers back, we wanted to make sure that they were retrained. We had changed a lot during COVID. So that took a little bit of time, and during that time, some, moved on to other things. So, but we always have a pretty steady stream of applications coming in to volunteer at the library, and it's continuing to rise. At its highest, I think it was about 6 FTE, so we would love to get up a little bit higher, but that also requires the staff time to train them and get them ready to go and monitor their progress too.
Yep. Thanks.
My question was about the increase in the circulation of materials. What do you attribute that to? What are some of the factors? Is it just people just showing up, or?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing we learned during the pandemic is that people still love to read physical books. We had digital materials available, and that did really well, but we heard loud and clear from the community that they wanted to get into the building and check out those books, so which thrills us, of course. That's what we love. So yeah, I think that's it, and I think more people are getting out. The library's become louder. If you spend any time in there, you'll hear lots of conversations, lots of laughing from the children's room, and I think having that welcoming environment is bringing people back to the library and checking out items while they're there.
Right.
Yes.
So one of the things that I really love about the library is that you're so innovative. Like a couple of years ago, you started the Library of Things, and now the Seed Library. Can you tell us a little bit about the Seed Library? You mentioned you're doing it with the Parks Department.
Yes, the Seed Library, it began by, there's a couple different places that you can write to, and they'll send you boxes of seeds for free if you're a nonprofit, so we did that, and just started accumulating packets of seeds. Then we got some they look like card catalogs, and we alphabetized them. We had a couple volunteers stamp them. So essentially what you do is come into the library, and we have these little envelopes and cute little spoons, and you get out a couple seeds. You don't need the whole packet. So you just take what you want, you can label it and take it home. And the idea is that after you've grown things, that you might dry some of the seeds and bring them back, and it will eventually be self-sustaining.
I had a question. Is the partnership with SMART for kind of like the traveling library still going on?
We do partner with SMART for Books on the Bus. Is that what you mean?
Yes, thank you.
We have agreed to do it at some of the larger events a couple times a year rather than going to, on weekly visits, just because it is staff intensive.
Thank you.
I have a question just about library traffic and how it compares to other communities. Is that something that we know? I mean, I feel like a lot of people use our library and...
Yeah, a lot of people use our library. Especially during the pandemic when we had different services than other libraries, we got a lot of traction from other libraries. A lot of people came to ours specifically. We do pretty well in comparison. West Lynn's a pretty, in terms of funding and population, is pretty equivalent, and we're right there next to each other. And we partner a lot with them too, so.
So I have a question, if I could ask. I assume that we have contracts for electronic subscriptions, and those, it doesn't look like those have gone up very much.
No, and it really depends on which model it is. I mentioned Hoopla earlier, and that's a pay-per-use model, which is a little different than some of the other ones. So we can sort of throw out a number and put some parameters around it. You can check out 10 items per user, and that helps us sort of estimate what the cost will be, and we monitor it closely. If it looks like it's getting too much, we can lower that limit or put a cap on dollar amount per item, and that's just one model. But the tricky thing about digital materials is there's lots of different ways that publishers make those items available and lots of different cost mechanisms in play.
And it doesn't look like acquisition of new books is much.
We've kept that pretty flat for now. We've been, when I look at our actuals, it's pretty even for what we're spending. So we didn't want to put a bunch in more than what we are actually spending. And costs have not gone up significantly through our vendors for books.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shasta.
Thank you. So for fiscal year 23-24, no large changes here. Most predominantly, as Shasta mentioned, just a few ad packages for additional hours throughout the department. In total, a 0.9 additional full-time equivalency increase, as well as an additional ad package to replace the outdoor drive-up book drop. In total, bringing them from a fiscal year 22-23 amended budget of $2.3 million and FTE of 16.76 to a fiscal year 23-24 proposed budget of $2.4 million and FTE of 17.66. And that concludes our presentation on the library. With that, I will turn it over to Keith.
So that brings up our last program area, law enforcement, which covers public safety, our code compliance department, and our municipal court. And we have Gina Troja here, Assistant City Manager, to talk particularly about the law enforcement and code compliance areas.
Thank you, Keith. Good evening, members of the Budget Committee. So I am Gina Troja. I'm the Assistant City Manager. Typically, our police chief would be presenting this budget to you this evening, but Chief Warps is actually in Virginia. He is attending a class at the FBI Academy, which is really pretty exciting because it's a hard class to get into, and he was selected to do it. So I'm presenting his budget. He put together these slides, so I'll do the best that I can to go over what he's actually put together. So the program areas, as Keith mentioned, public safety, code compliance, and municipal court are in this budget. Public safety is our police department. As you all talked a little bit yesterday, we contract with Clackamas County Sheriff's Office for law enforcement services. We've done that since the city was incorporated. It's really been a positive relationship, I think, both for the Sheriff's Office as well as for the community. Code compliance, we have the code compliance coordinator here at the city. While that position is funded out of the law enforcement budget, that position is actually not in in the police department. That position is here at City Hall, and that position actually reports to myself. And then municipal court. Municipal court is actually in our finance department. And I think they're going to go over some of the slides for municipal court, Keith and Catherine. So if you want to move to the next slide there, Keith.
I got it.
Okay. So community focused, really the purpose of our police department is to focus on the community. And that means focusing on our community needs. What's important to our community? What does our community value? What are our issues? Every community is unique. Their values are different in every community. And the way that the chief has really led his team is to focus on what's important to Wilsonville and what are the issues here in our community. We have a dedicated behavioral health clinician in our police department. We added that position this year. That will be reflected in this budget number. In fact, it's reflected, if you look in your budget, it's reflected in the line item of the police contract. That position is actually rolled into the contract that we have with the sheriff's office. This has really been very popular, and this has been, I would say, it's kind of transformed the community. This position, her name is Brenda Evans. We have one person. She's really gotten involved in the community. She's built relationships with a lot of our nonprofits, with our social service agencies. She's been a huge resource to the police department. She responds to calls with our officers. She's been a great resource to our staff here at the city and our employees that may need some assistance when they're working with the public. She has been a great resource to them as well. Being community focused also means focusing on traffic, and we have an internal multidisciplinary team here at the city that addresses traffic concerns. So if a resident has a concern about speeding in their neighborhood, they can go on our city website, put in a request through the city's website, and then that information is gathered by this traffic concerns team. Included in that traffic concerns team are our patrol officers, our traffic patrol officers, representatives from our engineering department, our code compliance coordinator, representatives from our public works department. And what they do is they take a look at what those concerns are and from a comprehensive approach and decide what's the best solution. In some cases, it may be an engineering solution. In some cases, it means more patrol by our deputies. In some cases, it may be putting out the speed sign, which is something that our code compliance coordinator does. So this multidisciplinary approach to dealing with traffic has really been successful for us. We have a school resource officer. He's actually in that picture at the prom. His name is Zach Kiersey. He works at the high school, but he also is our school resource officer for all of our schools. So he spends time in our primary schools, in both of our middle schools. He is really involved in the community. You'll see him at sporting events. You'll see him at activities at the high school, in the homecoming parade. He's received a number of awards recently. And if you have noticed our school resource officer patrol vehicle, it's got a little wildcat symbol on it. He was instrumental in working with the graphic arts team at the high school to actually do that design. So that design was done by our students at our own school. And those are just a couple of other pictures that, that Rob had put into the slides. So if you want to move to the next one. So in terms of our priorities, and these are really Chief Warp's priorities, so I probably won't do them justice, but in terms of the priorities for 2023-24, community safety is obviously at the top of the list. We want to make sure that this community is safe for everybody that visits here, lives here, and works here. We're about relationship building. That's a priority to Chief Warps. It's what he instills in his team, making sure that we're out in the community, building relationships with our residents, building relationships with the business community, and with the people that visit our wonderful town. We're very problem-oriented, so he's really proactive in terms of doing proactive policing, not waiting till a problem happens, but looking at trends and making sure that we are adjusting resources appropriately to deal with any of those trends. And another priority for this next year is to continue that integration of our behavioral health clinician within the community. Again, this has been very successful. I think it's a model that other cities are looking at, and we get a lot of positive feedback from our community members about adding that position. So just to continue that integration this next year. So code compliance, this is our code compliance coordinator. That's our speed sign that he's holding up there. He's responsible for a number of different aspects of livability concerns in the community, but one of them is putting the speed sign up in our neighborhoods. And like I said earlier, that's part of our traffic concerns team when they're looking at concerns and issues that residents may have. A concern that we often receive is they're speeding in my neighborhood. And one of the ways that that we work at addressing that is that sign that he's actually holding will capture data. It'll capture how fast people are going. It will capture number of vehicles. And so it's a great way that we're able to respond to concerns within the neighborhoods. And so that sign will be rotated around the community as people have concerns about speeding in their neighborhood. We are a proactive kind of approach to compliance. And what that means is we're looking for voluntary compliance. We aren't out there citing people for code violations. Our goal is to get voluntary compliance, and that occurs through education. That's educating the community on what city codes are, and it's working with them to help them come into compliance where that is needed. Traffic concerns, you know, a lot of the traffic concerns that our code compliance coordinator addresses are parking, speeding, abandoned vehicles, and he works cooperatively with the police department on a lot of these things, and sometimes it's a multifaceted approach to addressing some of those issues. Livability concerns, and these are just a few. If you talked to David, he would tell you that no 2 days are the same. So his job has a lot of variety to it. But a lot of what he deals with are livability concerns. So concerns about overgrown vegetation, off-leash dogs, violations of the city's sign code, just to name a few. And he also manages the sidewalk repair reimbursement program. So if you didn't know that this program is available if you need to repair the sidewalk adjacent to your property, or you know of somebody who needs to. We have a repair reimbursement program to which you can receive up to, let me see, it's 50% up to, I think, $1,500 for repairing the sidewalk in front of your house. He manages that program. It's a great program. There's funds in the budget for it. You can get all the information online. So if you are interested in that program or you know somebody who is, please send them to our website. It's got a lot of detailed information there. But it's a great way that the city can help people with an expensive repair to your sidewalk. So, you know, sidewalks crack over time. Sometimes they're lifting because of tree roots and whatnot. So it's a great way that the city can help a resident with some of those expensive costs. And then I think Keith will cover the rest of this. Any questions that you may have for me?
So the sidewalk repair program, is that unusual? I haven't heard of a program like that in other cities.
Pretty common.
Yeah, I was going to say it's pretty common in other communities. That program has existed here for, I think, about 5 years. We've had that program in place, but it is relatively common in communities to be able to offer a program like that to assist with those costs. Yeah, it's a great program.
What are the restrictions in terms of the sidewalks that qualify? Do they have to be city street sidewalks?
They have to be public sidewalks, yeah. We wouldn't fund it for like an internal sidewalk at Costco or Target.
No, but I'm thinking about in areas like in Bilboa or even in Charbonneau where there are...
Those are public.
Those are public.
Yeah. They're in the right-of-way. They're in the public right-of-way.
If it's adjacent to your property, you're responsible for maintaining that sidewalk. So it would be those kind of sidewalks.
Sometimes we'll get complaints about, you know, someone tripped or, you know, so we have to follow up, but we try to give them an incentive to fix it, yeah.
That's a good question.
I have I thank you for that great presentation, and I'm glad to hear that Chief Werps has been invited to this class.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
The more the better, right? On this kind of skill. What I wanted to see if you could just mention is, well, I really appreciate that Brenda Evans, who is so new, is really has gotten out there, and we heard that in a meeting with her and saw that she's really been working with our agencies in Clackamas County. And along those lines, is there, now that we have Brenda here, are we still doing some other things with Clackamas County when we need special assistance that you know, things that are not standard in our contract? Or is she really covering that?
Well, I mean, Clackamas County, as part of our contract with them, they have specialized service. So if we need a SWAT team, we have a SWAT team available to us. If someone is in trouble on the Willamette, we have a dive team that they would make available to us. So it's all those specialized services that we do get to avail ourselves if we need them. Yeah.
Thank you.
But we have to pay extra for those in the contract, don't we?
No.
No.
Those are built in, that's built into the contract cost. We do not have to pay extra for those services.
Now, if we had like
That's
a
an
major,
episodic thing.
if we had like
Not every day.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, they're not housed here.
No.
But if we need them, we can avail it. But if we had like a God forbid, a homicide like they had in Oregon City there when I was there, the Ashley Pond, Miranda Gaddis one, our police budget, I think, tripled that year just because we had so many people on overtime. So something like that, we would have to pay extra for.
Yeah, something that would require an extensive amount of resources that would be atypical. We would likely have to pay some additional costs associated with that. But already built into the contract is to be able to access those.
I know the availability of them is in the contract. It says you can, here are all the things, but I thought I saw, maybe I'm really more jet lagged than I think.
I think it's if we add a significant level.
Right.
Well, I thought it was on a per use, it was this much for a SWAT team to come out and this much for this.
I don't think that's, no, I don't think that's how it works, but it would be for something that would be significant where we would have needed just like we have paid for overtime. We paid for overtime out in Charbonneau because there was a ring. I don't know if it was a Russian ring of people stealing things out of garages and stuff. We paid a lot of overtime for that. We finally caught those folks. We paid for overtime when we have backups on I-5. We have a motorcycle cop that would go and because people would block the intersection. So on things like that where we need extra resources, we do pay extra for that.
That's actually a good segue. So in your budget, there is a cost for what the police contract is with the sheriff's office. That is a budgeted amount. It gets reconciled every month to what actuals are.
Okay.
So that number is what the county has said, here's what we estimate the cost to be. But every month, they will bill us based upon what that actual cost is. So for instance, let's say you bring additional officers in on overtime. You might have a higher cost that month because you brought officers in on overtime to do a more enhanced approach to address a particular issue. So while that's an amount in there, it may fluctuate month to month. It never goes over that amount, I'll tell you that much.
Is the contract a multi-year contract, or is it negotiated year to year?
Just rolls over every year.
It rolls over, okay.
Yeah, it just rolls over every year.
I know there are a lot of traffic, like speeding and street racing back on Graham's Ferry behind Villebois, and there was like that crash that knocked over the big sign. Is that something that is like still of concern? And like, I don't even know if you know, something that they're monitoring still.
Is that the one where the police officer engaged in a chase and crashed his vehicle?
Yes.
Yeah. I think they caught that person.
Did they?
I think so,
Yeah, that individual, yes. And that is something that Chief Werps really tries to stay on top of, is if there are concerns like that, he'll put additional patrols out to really do an enhanced focus on something like that. But yes, that individual was caught.
So as the city grows, I noticed that if I go to page 166, officers per thousand drops down to its lowest level ever. Not significant, but it's still its lowest level ever, of 0.61. That takes me to my question, which is, as a new officer is brought on, if we decide we need X number of officers in our contract as opposed to what we currently have, and we want to increase by one, what is the funding mechanism for that?
For what?
For an additional officer?
General fund.
So if we're going to bring in another officer, we decide we need, if we've got 8 right now, we want to make sure that we've always got 9 on duty.
Yes.
How is that pre-funded, or is that?
We would do an ad package.
Yes. Okay.
We would come to the budget committee and we'd say, I will tell you, I've been in this for a long time, and I don't like that metric of officers per thousand, not as a standalone metric, just because
take it out?
it's part of what they do, but it's really the call volume, it's the type of calls. So every community is a little bit different. So it's one of the variables that you would look at, but it's like, are we adding new neighborhoods? So we need, more patrol officers. Do we have speeding problems? Maybe we need another traffic officer. So we would look at it, and that's kind of what the staffing study that we will do this next year will look at. What do we need for our community right now and then for the next 20 years?
Yeah, I wasn't trying to key on officers per thousand.
Okay.
But what I was trying to ask is, what is the mechanism to add a new officer?
The budget process. So if
Annually?
Yes.
Just so we wait until the following budget year, and that's when that decision is made.
Yeah, so it would be a discussion. If Rob felt like he needed another officer when we're doing budget development within the departments, he would come to her with a proposal, and then when we do our internal deliberations, we would have that discussion about, I think the last officer we added was a sergeant, wasn't it? Because we figured out that we had shift coverage issues with supervisory span of control, so we added it during the budget process.
It would be treated like any other ad package that you see before you this evening.
Question. Maybe it's outdated, but are we going to see, because we used to years back, maybe we do, and I just miss it nowadays, officers on bikes?
We do have officers on bikes.
Okay, it'd be great to see them around the middle schools and things like that as the kids are getting home. In Wood, we had I guess an off-site bullying issue. So an officer just happened to be riding a bike during the time where the kids are walking home and after sports. That would really do great with the PR relationship with the school district, the community, and everything else. I haven't seen them in our area, so I must be missing them when they are. And I've checked with my son, he hasn't either, so it'd be great. So anyway, I think it's a great way to connect.
They typically use those, the bicycle cops is what you're talking about. We typically use those on the parks and trails. Just because there's areas where we can't quite get to. I don't know if have we used them in schools? We have a school resource officer.
Yeah, they have gone to our schools and participated in some of our school events. Some of our schools actually do a bike safety program. I don't know if they are still doing it, but Wood Middle School used to do a bike safety program, and our officer used to come and help teach that. Our bike officer used to come and help teach that class and then lead the kids on their bike ride across town.
And I know we're limited on bodies, so I'm not trying to stretch things.
Right.
It'd be neat if we have public areas of sidewalks passed between Villebois, by Maury's Landing, River Green area, just a stretch of that time slot. If you ran an officer occasionally there, it'd be neat. The kids would probably, and the parents would appreciate, just a suggestion.
Well, this is timely because Chief Warps and I actually just had this conversation last week about the bike patrols and what his vision is for them this summer, and that's a lot of it. In fact, I just approved an invoice for some training that the two or three, I can't remember how many, of the officers who are actually going to be on the bicycles this summer. So they just went through a bike safety program, and I actually just approved the invoice for it. So yes, they will be out this summer.
Okay, sorry, one more follow-up. Code, and the speed, those speed signs. I want to commend your folks because River Green was having a concern, and it was like our HOA president kind of reached out to me, and I kind of connected. We all connected, and within seconds, there's a speed sign in front of our house.
Oh.
So here's the thing, and it was wonderful, but here's the thing. We as community members see these cars go speeding by, and I understand these things track the speed, but for me, logically, when you see that sign, aren't you slowing down? Don't they slow people down so the accuracy of what you're taking in the machine is altered because they're changing their behavior?
So we actually do it two ways.
Okay.
So when we put that sign up, the sign that you saw David holding in that picture, when he puts that sign up, he'll put it up for a period of time with it turned off. So he's gathering the data of the actual data without the sign turned on. So ideally, we're gathering what people are driving without that, and then we'll turn it on, and then we'll look at the difference.
Oh, okay. Well, that's
So we'll compare the difference in speeds once that sign's turned on. You're right, naturally, when we all see one of those signs and it's blinking at you, you go, oh my gosh, I need to slow down. That's just natural behavior. So that's why he runs it for a period of time with it off, to gather that data, and then we can show what happens when you actually turn it on.
I commend him in that work because it really helped our community become more aware. We have a lot of kids playing in the streets, so thank you for that response.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll pass that on to him. Thank you. Any other questions before? Yes.
I do. I have a question, if that's all right. But first, actually, to kind of underscore Member O'Neill's comments about the bike police, too. I'm remembering some of the feedback that I heard from the second graders when I have been speaking with the second graders at Lowry is also about the bike police. It's popular. And I think it's because it's so visible to the young people in the community. When the majority of your time driving around Wilsonville is in the back seat of a car, it's harder to see people too. You know, I mean, it's harder to see what's going on. Their windows are usually like shaded, and you know, it just, I'm starting to realize that as my own kid's getting bigger and stuff, she's just less aware when she's in the back seat. But when you yourself are out on a bike and then you see a safety officer also on a bike, then it's much more visible and approachable and terrific thing. So it was interesting to hear that feedback from the second graders. I think there was also a request for police on horses, which I know it's a whole different thing. But my question was about staffing, because we had that presentation, you know, at the beginning of the evening about the challenges of filling some positions. And I wondered if you could just provide a little commentary on how the contract works with Clackamas County as far as staffing and filling these positions, differences, observations that you've noticed, because I'm assuming then that staffing doesn't happen, or the recruitment doesn't happen in the same way as our other city positions.
That's correct. So when you hire a police officer, it's a very long process to hire a police officer, from the point that you get the application to the point that the sheriff's office actually gets the application, and they go through the interviews and whatnot. They have to go through an extensive background check process, which is a lot longer than the background check process that we have employees go through here at the city. They have to go to the academy, and then they have to go through a field training program. So that takes many months before that person is actually, what they would say, out on the street. So before they're actually out patrolling. So that is a very long process. So when we add a position, if you were to add a position through an ad package request, we make that request to the sheriff's office. They will get us that position as soon as they can. Sometimes they shuffle around some of their positions at the county, and they're able to get it to us sooner than what they would expect. In terms of how they're doing for recruitment, kind kind of like what Andrea was talking about earlier. It's tough recruiting sometimes in the public sector. They've been pretty successful from what I've heard from Chief Warps recently in getting some really good qualified candidates. I think he said from the county, from the entire sheriff's office, they have something like 14 at the academy right now. I want to say 7 out in field training, so that's good. They're making progress, and it sounds like their recruitment efforts and the marketing that they're doing it's really paying off. But it is a lot longer time frame before you get somebody actually out patrolling on the streets than when we hire somebody here at the city. It's a lot longer training process.
Other questions? Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So the total police budget for 23-24 proposed $6.5 million with 23 contracted police officers and 1 code enforcement officer, and the main ad package being that police FTE study that Brian mentioned yesterday and talked a little bit about here today. The last department we have tonight is just our municipal court. It's got a $256,000 budget. The city holds court twice a month. It's traffic violation court only, and there's really no significant variable from one year to the other. So unless there's any specific questions on municipal court, we can close that as well.
I had a quick question, if you know. For traffic violations where the individual goes to a diversion program instead, does the city keep the entire funds that they get from that, or do they send the portion to the state like they do with other fines?
Yeah, I think the state gets a portion of that. I think the way it works is there's a fee that gets assessed to the violator that they pay the city, and then they have to as well pay for the class, and then we pay a proportionate share to the state of Oregon for every violation, including those, and so we get a percentage goes to the state.
Okay.
And then the violation, depending on what it is, and not everybody qualifies, there's a whole litany of regulations who qualifies, depending on what type of violation it is, how fast they were going and stuff. So it's a very specific type of violation that qualifies to begin with. But yeah, the state gets a portion of it.
Thank you.
And okay, so that wraps up pretty much, well, everything. And one last piece I would leave you with is the 5-year forecast of the general fund. So we have the revenue line there trending, and we have, you'll notice that spike in expenses generally, but we're well above the reserve minimum balance required of the fund. But you can see how this dotted line sometimes dips into the reserve. What that mainly is really it's for those one-time capital improvement projects that we fund through general fund. The city has about, I forget the exact number, is about $100 million in unfunded capital improvement projects in general. But every year we chip away at some of those things, and a lot of the times we'll use the general fund to fund Parks and Rec, CIP projects, facilities projects. So that's how we watch the general fund. We make sure we're not dipping too much into that reserve to pay for those one-time capital projects, but that's why you'll see the reserve dip from one year to the other when we dip into it to pay for capital improvement projects. And as I said earlier, and we have one more public hearing after this to talk about the urban renewal budget. With the urban renewal budget, with the urban renewal districts closing down, that is putting some money back into the general fund by way of property tax, and we can talk about that in our next presentation. But just wanted to give you a highlight the 5-year forecast, again, which is in the back of the book. Not really, we don't budget for it, but it's the next 5 years after this budget. So we're looking down the line, not only at 23, 24, but the next 5 years after that. And the general fund generally looking pretty healthy, well above our council financial policy minimums. And that concludes really the city portion of the budget. And then next, we would turn it back over to the chair for discussions and motions and amendments or
Okay.
additional questions.
With that said, are there any further questions for city staff concerning the budget as presented? No questions? Okay, so at this time, if there's no questions, I will close the public hearing and at 8:49 p.m. and ask for a motion to approve or disapprove the budget.
I move for approval of the fiscal year 2023-24 proposed budget as amended to increase the street capital fund street maintenance capital improvement project CIP number 4014 by $1 million inclusive of $910,000 in capital project expense, $60,000 as a related project management fee transfer out to the community development fund, and $30,000 as related overhead transfer out to the general fund. Funding to be provided through $1 million transfer out from the road maintenance fund with offsets to contingency to balance each fund. To accumulate the total amount of $277,476,344 and levying the full amount of the city general tax rate of $2.5206.
That was a whopper.
Yeah, that was. Do I have a second?
Second.
And there's discussion?
Yeah.
Yes. Correct. Discussion. Any discussion or questions concerning that amendment?
So this was a motion to.
Or motion, I'm sorry. Thank you.
So it's a motion to approve the budget with the amendments as noted, so that way you don't have to go through all three of those processes.
Oh.
A more streamlined approach.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion?
I just wanted to comment that I appreciate your leadership of our committee chair and the staff's work in really great presentations and also all the questions from the committee and the discussions. And I hope everybody will stay in touch and ask questions as you go through the year and see things. If you want to find out more, contact the city. But thank you, everyone.
I would also like to say thank you, too. Done this a couple times. You guys do a great job. Wilsonville is a good city. It's a great city, great place to live, and you guys take care of us very well.
Thank you.
If there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Then the 2023-2024 budget is now approved. And do I adjourn this hearing and start another one?
Well, you've already adjourned the hearing, the public
closed the
hearing,
hearing, right?
so yeah, we'll move on to the next public hearing, which is the urban renewal.
Okay, so now we move on to the urban renewal portion of the meeting. So I need to go back through number, okay. Thank you.
Yep.
All right. I call to order the Wilsonville Budget Committee public hearing on the City of Wilsonville fiscal year 2023-24 urban renewal budget. Ladies and gentlemen, the Budget Committee will be taking public testimony tonight at the public hearing. The hearing will be conducted in the following manner. As a courtesy, members of the public have the option to provide public testimony on the proposed budget before the staff presentations begin in order to accommodate those citizens that do not want to wait until the presentations have been made to speak. Community members may elect to wait to testify until the staff presentations have been completed. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes. A time buzzer will go off when the 3 minutes are up. Testimony will be provided as follows: by proponents, opponents, and those neither in favor nor against the proposed fiscal year budget. Number 2, staff will present the report. 3, additional public testimony will be allowed in the same order: proponents, opponents, and those neither in favor nor against the proposed fiscal year budget. And 4, after all community members who wish to speak have testified, staff will have time to provide any additional comments to the committee. Information regarding how the public could attend this meeting and give testimony is posted at City Hall and was also timely published in the Wilsonville Spokesman and is also posted on the city's website shown on the screen. Notice was given that testimony could be submitted for the record in advance in writing by emailing or mailing it to the city recorder. If you are listening to the meeting remotely, then the time for public testimony is called. Please use the raised hand feature in Zoom or press *9 on your telephone if you wish or if you would like to testify. If you prefer and have not already done so, you may also submit written testimony by email at any time before the public hearing is closed by emailing the city recorder at the email address now being shown on the screen. Any testimony sent by email will be read into the record. Please include your name and mailing address with your email testimony. If you're having difficulties with these instructions, you may call the number shown on the screen and enter webinar ID number shown on the screen when prompted. When called up to testify, state your full name and address for the record. I request that those providing testimony not to repeat testimony that has already been given to the City Council. Simply indicating you agree with the prior testimony given by the speaker you identify as sufficient. Is there anyone wishing to testify?
Chair, before we get into testimony, my apologies. We have to do the roll call and the motion to approve the order and the minutes and the approval of the prior minutes for the urban renewal. But you don't have to repeat everything you just said. So let's start with the roll call before we get into the testimony.
Chair Skull.
Here.
Member Fitzgerald.
Here.
Member Akabal.
Here.
Member Berry.
Here.
Member Dunwell.
Here.
Member Linville. Here. Member Ham.
Here.
Member Moulton.
Here.
Member O'Neill. Member Russell.
Here.
Thank you.
And now you can ask for a motion to approve the order of agenda.
Could I have a motion to approve the minutes?
The order of agenda first.
Order of agenda?
So moved.
Here a second? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed?
Moved by O'Neill, seconded by Berry.
And then the motion to approve the minutes of the May 19, 2022 Urban Renewal Budget Committee meeting.
Could I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second?
That was O'Neill.
Oh, yes.
O'Neill and Berry again.
O'Neill, yeah.
She knows my voice.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed.
Okay, now you can ask if there's anyone who's ready to testify.
Thank you. Is there anyone wishing to testify? Hearing no further requests to testify, the city manager will kick off the budget presentation with the budget message followed by staff presentation.
Brian, if you don't have anything to say, basically with the urban renewal budget this year, there's basically 4 things happening. There's 2 CIP projects, there's 1 debt payoff, and then there's 1 rebate happening that is budgeted for. So I'll just go through it real quick. There's just a couple slides. It's 1 agency. We have 3 plans and 1 program. It's called the WIN program. The Year 2000 program, the West Side District, and the Coffee Creek District, and the Wilsonville Investment Now program. The Year 2000 plan, the status is closing. It's closing as effective June 30th, 2023. We've reached the maximum indebtedness. There's no outstanding debt. There'll be no more tax increment next year. So that essentially releases $3.5 million back to all the overlapping taxing districts. Wilsonville gets a portion of that as well, about 20%. So, and that's already been budgeted next year into our property tax number that we went over yesterday. So with that, the only remaining project is that Beckman Dip Bridge project, and that will remain next year and perhaps even the year after until that gets completed. The other plan is the West Side Plan that was established in 2003. It had a maximum indebtedness of $49.4 million. We've reached that as well. So this next year we'll be closing that. There's still one outstanding bond debt due, and that will be paid next year. But it'll allow us to under levy the increment next year. We've been levying around $5 million every year for the past many years. We're going to ratchet that down to $1.6 million, and that releases next year $3.4 million out to the taxing districts. And after fiscal year 2023-24, no further tax increment will be needed. And there is one remaining project as well. That is Brown Road. I think that there's a little bit of costs incurred next year, and it'll probably be linger on for another year or two outside of that. So those two plans are coming really to an end very shortly. The Coffee Creek plan, however, is just really getting started. That was established in 2016. It has a maximum indebtedness of $67 million. There's still $62.7 million available. We have a small bond outstanding that we make debt service payments on that one as well. There's no capital improvement projects budgeted for 2023. We just haven't gotten enough base or reserve built up of tax increment to move forward with additional development, but we anticipate it's coming. The final program within the Urban Renewal Agency is the WIN program, and that essentially the participant for current is the Twist Bioscience company, and they are eligible to the extent the assessment comes in above there's a frozen base of $3.6 million when that program was started for that company. So to the extent that the assessment comes in above that base from both the real property, the tenant improvements that they've built out there, and the personal property, the equipment that they've brought into that facility, as well as meeting all the targeted WIN program employment metrics, they will potentially be awarded what we call the rebate of that, and the program is anticipating and has budgeted for a $750,000 rebate for that program for next year. So here in a kind of row and columnar format is are all the plans and the program, and then over there in the green is the total budget. The total budget is the $23.5 million. The total resources will always equal the total requirements, but column by column you'll see the year 2000 plan, there's no more increment. There's just a little bit of investment revenue. That $9.3 million in the capital projects line represents the Beckman Bridge project. Right next to that is the west side. We've ratcheted down the tax increment to be collected to that 1.7 million. And the capital project remaining in there, that 0.7 is the Brown Road project that will happen next year and as well as in future years. Next to that is the Coffee Creek. We're anticipating $600,000 in tax increment, and there's no capital projects budgeted. Finally, the tax increment from the WIN program, we estimate the rebate to be $750,000, and that's what we've budgeted. And it comes out, and you'll see it as materials and services. That will be the payment to the Twist company, assuming they meet the requirements of the program. So that combines to create a $23.5 million resource and requirement budget for the Urban Renewal Agency, and that essentially then becomes the motion to approve. And that is pretty much all I have for the presentation. If you have questions on the capital improvement projects, we can bring, I think, Zach up. But we kind of covered those as well in the CIP budget.
Any questions? Okay, then if there's no questions, that closes the hearing, the urban renewal hearing at 9:03. And then at this time, I would ask for a motion to approve the urban renewal budget.
Go ahead. Sure.
I move for approval of the 2023-24 proposed budget for the Urban Renewal Agency in the amount of $23,489,759 and set the increment assessed value in the West Side Plan District to approximately $122,100,000, which will generate an estimated levy of $1,600,000 and levy the full amount of the Divide the Taxes amount for the Coffee Creek District and the Wind Twist Bioscience plans.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? I'm getting it. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Then the 2023-2024 urban renewal budget passes. And anything further from there?
All the business?
That's all.
All the business? So at this time, I will adjourn the Wilsonville Budget Committee meeting for 2023 and 2024 in urban renewal.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you.